Preparing to live stream. Gosh, it's going right through that. That's a good sign. Nice.
Perfect.
8:01. We're only a minute. Good. That's really good, guys. Okay. All right. We are live.
Woo.
I'm gonna put the link in the chat again, and you guys can someone put it in Slack? Porfa. Hold on. Oh, can you guys hear that? That's not a good loop. Okay, there we are on YouTube. All right. And so it begins. Zach's not here, obviously. Zach is on shift, so Dan Crenshin is with us. Dan, unmute yourself. Yeah, I was just gonna say. Whoa. And Kevin and Dan have Ethernet cables, so we are gonna hear every word you guys say. It's gonna be so good.
Freaking better, I swear. If this is not work, I don't know what to do next.
It's gonna be great. Okay. Can one of you put the link in Slack? And I will post it really quick on Facebook.
It's not letting me copy it.
Hmm?
It's not letting me copy the link from, this is weird. From the chat window. Come on. Are you live on your page, Mary Kate?
Am I what?
There we go. One sec.
Facebook is just the worst.
I think that can apply just about any type of situation, huh?
Why can't I see you? Why can't I see it live on the link?
Yeah.
I trying to go live on YouTube and on Facebook.
No, you can go live on both. Unless any of you have any ideas about how to set up like a platform that we could stream from both, but through Zoom, it won't let you stream to both YouTube and Facebook at the same time. So I was just posting on Facebook the link, but I was just commenting about how Facebook's the worst because they just tank traffic on stuff now and it just sucks.
Or watch out, Zuckerberg's gonna come after you.
You know, it's actually really funny when, well, never mind. We can talk about that. Not on YouTube, not on the live stream. Never mind.
Big Brother's watching.
Well,
Big
when
Brother's
isn't that
watching.
true?
Never mind. All right. Okay, so should we go? I feel like we have to kill 10 minutes because we didn't start till 10 or 8:15 last time. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's do another quick intro round, but we'll make it quick. Let's not spend a half an hour doing this, and let's do name, like what you do or whatever. And how have you celebrated Easter in the last 2 days? Like, what is like a notable thing you've done to celebrate Easter? Okay.
Yeah. So my name's John. I am a recently graduated nurse. Still looking for a job. So all that jazz. Prayers for that, please.
And we covered
And
that last time.
yeah, celebrating Easter by having a good breakfast with the roommates, and then we went and smoked a chicken and did some played some basketball outside and stuff. So had a fun time celebrating Easter yesterday with the roommates.
Nice. Tim, let's go.
I'll go next. Oh, just
okay.
kidding.
Evan, go. Evan, go.
All right,
Go.
I'll go next. My name's Evan, as we probably already figured out.
That was such a good start.
I'm a practice area coordinator, so I'll let you guys all figure out what that means. And I celebrated Easter basically same way as John, but he didn't tell you guys about a trainer family tradition. So John's family tradition, you all are going to find out about that because we did it yesterday. It was an egg roll, where it's a competition. It's like brackets, and two people line up and roll an egg against. So like you're facing off against one other person, and you roll the eggs, and the one that breaks loses, and the one that doesn't break moves on. That's what we did. It's great.
And
Whoa.
I'll give you guys one guess who won.
Wait,
It's
did you?
I'm guessing it's John Trainer.
It
John
was.
Trainer
That's a
won.
good guess.
Well,
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
had practice.
Well,
I
Wait,
wouldn't have
did
guessed
you
that,
say this?
John.
Are these hard-boiled eggs or are these?
they are hard-boiled eggs.
Well, that's
Okay.
boring. That's just boring.
That is boring, actually. I was hoping you were going to say they were raw.
I'm not going to be the one to clean it up. I'm not going to clean it up.
No, Ephraim cleans it up. Come on.
Mm,
That's what he's there for.
naturally.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Who's next?
My name's Tim Berryhill, seminarian,
Nice.
pre-theology 2, currently residing at St. Edward's Parish on the north side of Chicago. For Easter, I'm one of the lucky ones that got to, as part of living in a Catholic church, got to take part in the liturgies. Red was the lector and altar server for Easter liturgies and for all of Holy Week. And so very, very blessed to have been able to do that. Then we spent the afternoon at the Nyberg's house having a massive feast. So
There was a thurible. I saw a picture
Awesome.
of a thurible at the meal.
It was cool.
yes, there was. It was great. Father Dom blessed the whole table, and we had they have their own little little thurible, and I got to. Oh, it was great.
It looked delicious.
Oh, it was
That's
great.
awesome.
The
Were
kielbasa
there
was.
any?
Oh
was there
man,
any
that-
live music happening at the Nyberg Easter celebration?
live music? No.
Oh,
that's disappointing.
dang. That's actually a huge surprise.
They
Wow.
were playing a Slovenian mass in the background, and it sounded beautiful. Lots of great music. So I guess that
Nice.
counts.
Oh, Evan's going mobile.
That does count. What'd you say?
Evan's going mobile. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Now, figured out who has the internet problems today. Not me.
It's gotta
Kevin's
be
anxious to
somebody.
pin this off on someone else.
Yeah. For real. I guess I'll go next. I'm Kevin Gregus, also a seminarian, staying at St. Alphonsus. Tonight, if you're interested, I'm drinking Jameson and ginger, and I've also got my LaCroix, so do not worry. I'm going to be well hydrated. I do have to throw it out. John Trainer was the first one to introduce me to this drink
Oh, yeah.
at Side Street, the best bar in Chicago. And
Best bar in Chicago. Shout out to Side Street.
oh man, we're all praying that it survives this. It survives the coronavirus.
Gotta get that grant money.
Yeah, beer grant money. So I like Tim because I'm a seminarian, and I was at St. Alphonsus. We were able to go to mass for the Triduum and on Easter. We our Easter vigil was pretty surreal. It was just the four of us here, so me and Dan, Father Steve, and Mike, who's the other seminarian here, and it was just. So we did it in the main church, which if you've ever been to St. Alphonsus, it's a huge, beautiful church, but it was completely empty except for the four of us. But we did the whole thing exactly like you would. Just, I mean, there's no,
Was the vigil live streamed?
we did not live stream the vigil.
Okay.
We did live stream Easter Mass the next morning with live music.
Okay.
It was beautiful. It was so cool, good to hear the organ going again. Yeah, it was, and then we had in the afternoon we had there's a housekeeper here, and she made us this delicious Easter meal with ham
Nice.
and sweet potatoes and chocolate chip cookies. It was very good.
Nice. Dan?
My name is Dan Karenchin. I'm also a seminarian with the Great Archdiocese of Chicago. I'm a classmate of Kevin's, and so one of my favorite parts of Easter, and just a really cool thing we got to do. So as we were finishing Easter Vigil, I was wondering if we were going to sing Jesus Christ is Risen Today. And that's just the Easter song, in my opinion. You can't have Easter without that song. And I'm like, oh man, we didn't really plan on anything, but I'm like, I just had this just gut feeling to just start belting it out as we were finishing. And so I did. I just started singing that. So we did finish the
It
vigil.
was legit. It was legit. It was so
It was
cool.
awesome.
That's awesome. I love that.
I had this really awesome moment where as we're singing the second verse, just I'm so used to hearing the song and just this church full of people, whether it's people who regularly attend mass or whether it's, the priesters, whoever it is, it's just a church full of people and people are just belting it out because everyone knows that song. But I found myself getting a little emotional because it's just this empty church with just the four of us. and we're singing this, and it's just this song of just great joy and praise for the Lord on his great day, and it's in this just very empty church. So it was just it was really hard to experience like both emotions at the same time. But it was very cool, but it was also it was a little sad as well. So
Wow.
it was really cool.
Nice. Cool. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. So I guess I gave context last time, but I didn't really do that right now. So for anyone watching, I don't know if anyone's actually watching, but I would assume some people are watching.
We got some. We got some.
We got some. Are you looking at it?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So why do we do this? Kevin talked for a while about like how can we have an online presence? We like our Catholic community at St. Al's or whatever. How can we have an online presence during this quarantine time? And like Dan, you and I have talked a lot about how people are probably using the internet right now, which is in a variety of ways, right? Like people are probably, watching Netflix and I don't know, whatever, doing all the things we all do on the internet, social media, all those things, but they're also probably using it in some ways that they shouldn't be using it. So it's good to have some stuff out there that's an opportunity for some good fruits. So that's what we're trying to do. Also, we're trying to bring this Slack community that we have through St. Alphonsus. John, I see you like gearing up to speak. What are you gonna say?
Well, I'm just saying, like, the Slack, I mean, yeah, it's the entire community, right? But I mean, it's Kevin Gregus, it's Mary Kate Knorr.
There's like 10 of us.
Yeah, it's the funniest
there's
thing.
There's officially 122 people.
That's what I was gonna add. Yeah.
Officially, and
Wow.
And be aware that most of them are reading. They're just not actually saying anything.
We have some lurkers.
I never
We've
type
got a lot of
anything. I
lurkers.
wouldn't want 100+ people to know.
So anyway, that's the whole purpose of this, right? So last time we did 2.5 hours, just chatting about coronavirus, all these things, et cetera, et cetera. Tonight we've got some other ideas about what we can talk about. I think a good like intro to that. My big thing. Sorry, my dog's now gonna hop off the couch. That's distracting. My big thing with all of this is I think that there's a lot that we could talk about. There's a lot we talk about in Slack. I think it's important to keep it relevant for people. I think that, I don't know, maybe you guys have different ideas, but I think that right now with where people are at, they're thinking about the immediate moment because we're living in a very profound time in the sense that this is a time that I don't think we'll ever forget. I think it will affect our lives for years to come. I think that we'll be talking about it for a long time. So I think it's important to keep some of what we talk about relevant, and really a lot of the conversations that we've been having the last few weeks in Slack and elsewhere here have somehow like come from what we're currently experiencing at this time. Sorry, I don't know. Can you hear my dog? Like breathing and just never mind.
It's
so anyway,
it's really adding to the experience.
It's not too much.
Really distracting for me what he's doing right now. Anyway, so all that said, we really want to keep it relevant. We talked about a couple different things we could talk about today. Let's just start, I guess, ease in. John, you had mentioned like Easter obviously looks different right now. The actual day looked different, but I think in general the season is going to look different. And during Lent, this made a lot of sense. And we talked about this last week, like the connections between Lent and living in quarantine and how there's a very clear parallel there. But now that it's Easter, what does that look like? And how can we live Easter while we're still quarantining and hoping, it's almost like, it almost feels like we're still in Lent, like we're hoping for this to change. And it's not yet. So any thoughts about that? I mean, how can we live it well as the Easter season?
Yeah, I mean, I like you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Is that I'm sure all of us and then many people out there, their Easter Sunday, they did, find ways to celebrate, but you can't do that every day. You can't make every single day, even though it's supposed to be the Easter season. Then you end up just eating way too much food and drinking way too much. And obviously that's not a healthy way to live. Moderation, Kev, moderation. So, I mean, I don't have any answers because that's a question I'm struggling with very much, is that, because even yesterday, I had a lot of fun with my roommates and we enjoyed our time. It still didn't really feel like Easter though. Just I wasn't with my family, you know. And for those of us that aren't in seminary or aren't in seminary yet, Kevin, and for those of us that didn't get to actually attend Mass, obviously that made the feeling entirely different as well. So now we come to a day where, like the Easter season, where we're still supposed to celebrate, we're still supposed to be joyous. And how do we do that while still being quarantined? I think it's a huge question that everyone has to grapple with in their own way, but I don't have an answer.
Does anyone have an answer?
Tim, you're muted.
Oh, trying to be like.
Oh man, did you say something really good, Tim?
Mary Kay muted you.
Yeah,
I was
did.
saying, there's a book written by Walter Chisek called "He Leadeth Me." Dan and I read it while we were at the house.
All right, raise your
And-
hand if you've read that book.
So
It's
good.
It's
It's a great book.
And then we have
Walter,
2 copies.
there you go. Yeah, and it's also a short read. It's not super dense. You know, you can get through it pretty quickly. Walter Chisek is a Jesuit who I can't remember the years exactly. I think it's just prior to World War II. He spent something like 30 years in a Soviet gulag. They thought he was like a Vatican infiltrator, and they just locked him away. So much so that the Society of, he's a Jesuit, the Society of Jesus thought he was dead, and they had like a little burial for him. They gave away all his stuff, and when they found out he was alive, like, oh my gosh. But he has certain accounts about how he would celebrate in Mass, and he didn't talk about Easter specifically, but he was almost like in a quarantine situation as well, where there would be like between bars, you know, there'd be several people and there'd be like these barriers between them. But even he would find a way, even in amongst those conditions, to like somehow like make bread and consecrate it. Now, obviously we can't do that here, but I think that's a good inspiration, you know, about finding community in Easter, because it's hard to do like by ourselves. You know, very few people are called to legitimate hermitage, like finding community. I can't remember where I thought I had a good idea with that, but it's escaping me now.
That's
But
good.
just like his experience of the isolation, kind of like allowing that kind of like, yeah, I'm experiencing that too, but we can still find joy. I will always be an advocate for the Office of the Hours, the universal prayer of the church. You're literally praying around the world with everybody, every Christian, and that should give us heart and give us hope.
And you get to pray the same morning prayer for a week right now, so that's fun.
That's right. Yeah.
Chanting.
And evening prayer.
Everything on this page, bless the Lord. Everything on that page, bless the Lord.
Oh.
Frost and chill, bless the Lord. Netflix and chill, bless the Lord.
Oh, no.
Is this
Dolphins
a thing
and water
breaking into
creatures.
song? Is that a thing?
Culinary humor.
Dan regularly breaks into song.
Yeah,
Really?
that's true.
And,
Oh
and
yeah.
liturgical dance.
Dan,
Nice.
do the Mario tone
Cool,
for the
Dan.
Mundelein Psalter. Do it.
What?
I
So we have this-
walk the hallways at Mundelein doing this, and
That was PT 1 year. He would do it so much.
And then he got it beaten out of him, I assume.
No, that's not true.
Yeah.
So for further context, at Mundelein, we have the Mundelein Psalter. And so it's the divine office, but we have our own tones that go with it. And one of the tones is da 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 da. But Dan, you know, he has to put his own spin on it, and it's just like there's one of these tones. It's almost like Mario Kart, like da 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 da. Like great.
okay, bye everybody.
Wow. Good. That's great.
Thank you for supporting my formation. Please donate to Mundelein Seminary.
Do you have any thoughts to contribute to the actual question?
Donate your
Although the
money,
singing is
America.
excellent, I appreciate it. so much.
You
On the spot, someone else can speak if they want, if Dan has nothing to
I
add.
don't know. So the question is, how do we celebrate Easter in the midst of what doesn't very much feel like an Easter world right now, right? It's just like with quarantine and all that. And I mean, I guess understanding the Triduum and Easter is just understanding just that is how Christ he destroys sin, and then he dies, destroys sin, and then rises again, right? And that's supposed to be what we're supposed to do. And if we're truly going to be an Easter people, then we have to realize that like there's a lot of things that we have to die to. One of the things that I really, dare I say, that I love about this time of quarantine is it's just given me so much time to just reflect on just how do I live my life, and what are my daily habits? What are like the small things that I do each day, because there's so much less in each day. And so it's easier to focus in on just the little things. And I just think that if we want to be transformed, if we want to live out the resurrection and receive receive those graces, I think those graces want to transform us. And just, it may not be in these like really big ways. Maybe it will be. But I think just I think it'll be in little ways, and the ways we just grow in virtue to start there.
I think along the lines of what you're saying, like in a very practical sense, Easter is almost an opportunity within quarantine for us to decide that we're going to start living quarantine better. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to be really lazy. And I know I've been pretty lazy about some things.
Well, I wonder if it also kind of can stem from a misunderstanding of almost a secular viewpoint of Lent, right? Like, because as you're describing like how you can improve during this Easter time in quarantine, I'm thinking to myself, oh, it sounds a lot like Lent. I'm gonna use this time to pray more. I'm gonna take on these different things, whereas maybe I just am not really understanding Lent, and I'm using Lent almost as like self-improvement as opposed to actually in a liturgical season. And that's probably in a way leading to me feeling like Easter isn't really here because of the quarantine as well. So,
well, and I think that, okay, that's actually a really good point too, because I think that it's this game we play in our heads of like, Lent is the season of saying no, and Easter is the season of saying yes. Like we're going to fast and then we're going to celebrate. And it's like, barrenness in Lent, and then it's like fullness in Easter. And I think that theoretically is true, but I also think that, like, for example, when you're saying no to something, if you're doing it in the right way, it should be ordered so that maybe not all the time, but I think when you're saying no to things for the right reasons, oftentimes it's that you're actually saying yes to something else. So like if I'm saying no to laziness or sloth, I'm saying yes to, I don't know, what's the opposing virtue to that vice? You know what I mean? So like, I think
Self-discipline.
Yeah, self-discipline. So I think that, to your point, John, I feel like that is a way that we can really take this time and say, okay, I'm not gonna, maybe I am gonna like cut out Facebook for a particular like time of the day, not because I'm fasting or because it's like a Lenten mindset, but because I'm going to say yes to doing other things with that time that are better and more fruitful and more productive than, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You're all like,
all right. Next question.
We're ready. All right, cool. Should we just dive right in? I don't know, you guys, I don't know how to intro some of these topics that we want to cover. I just know how we talked about them in Slack. So I guess I can just do that.
Tim.
I did want to mention one thing. So Mary Kate, you asked the question last time about the church, like kind of shutting down, so to speak, for the pandemic. I was doing some research and I didn't find too many instances of like the universal church shutting down. There was a couple of handful of dioceses during the Spanish flu that kind of shut down. And there's like pictures of these like long tongs that they would serve the Eucharist on these tongs. I found that.
Oh yeah, I
But
saw
But more
that.
interestingly, there is an encyclical. Shoot, I can't remember who the Pope was. It was Benedict XIV. Benedict XIV wrote an encyclical during a time of plague, and he was talking about how during times of plague that your penances, they specifically for like Lenten penances, that they can be relaxed. That doesn't really serve like a greater point, but I just want to let you know that I looked into it. And
Nice, because I did ask that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing we keep hearing about. I think I asked that because that's the thing we keep hearing in defense of, and I'm not necessarily saying, I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts about it that we don't need to get into now, but the reason I asked that question is you hear that argument a lot in favor of shutting all the churches down, is that, well, we've done this before. This isn't that big of a deal. Why is everyone acting like this is, like this has never been done before? And I don't think that's really the case. It's not really been done to this extreme. So what you're telling me is like in smaller doses in certain dioceses, it's been done before.
In small doses, yeah.
But not to this scale necessarily that it's at right now.
Yeah, the scale maybe pertains to Lenten practices, and they didn't go into specifics about it, but I'll see if I can find it again. I'll put it in the chat.
That's actually a good segue into one of the things that we wanted to talk about, because we talked this week in Slack about, I used the phrase government overreach, but that's because I'm very conservative. So I don't know if that's the appropriate way to phrase that. But I think that we were having this conversation about what's the appropriate level of involvement for the government to take. We talked about it in a couple of different contexts, right? So like on the one hand, we talked about it in the context of philanthropic giving and charity, and should the government tax people so that they can then turn around and use that money to pay for social services? Or should people just be willing to, and when I say people, I guess we're referring specifically to like millionaires, right? That's kind of, I think, the very specific like group we were talking about. Or on the other hand, should we just trust those people to give and provide, maybe even provide incentives for them to make major gifts, like major charitable donations to whatever charities they prefer, because there's a certain level of freedom. Now I'm getting into my argument why I think that's the right thing to do. Never mind. Anyway, the point is the two separate options, right? Or the other context we were talking about it in is coronavirus, shutting the whole economy down, saying all these businesses have to close because we don't trust that people aren't going to go out, aren't going to, swap germs with all the other people that they come in contact with, aren't going to wear masks, aren't going to do all these things, take all these precautions to protect their health and the health of the people around them. Since we don't trust them, we're going to potentially tank the entire national economy because we want to protect health in fear of what could be if this escalates to the extent that it could. Thoughts?
Well, it's always going to be difficult to have a concrete, specifically on the coronavirus side of this thing, because it is mostly based off of projections and models that are constantly changing. So if you're listening to, the initial model of 300,000 people were going to die if we did nothing, then yeah, of course, go for it. You need the government to step in and make these unilateral decisions to prevent the unmitigated loss of life that would happen. So, yeah, I mean, it's a non-answer, but it's one that I don't think has an exact answer. It's gonna be very situational and context dependent.
I have thoughts, but I'll let you guys talk.
Well, I think in America, there's the public health versus the clinical medicine, which is we're used to dealing with the latter of like, if you get sick, then you go to a hospital, to a doctor, to anywhere, and you find a way to get better. You get treated for whatever illness you have, and then you get better. Whereas I think what we're trying to deal with now with public health and how other countries choose to do it is that they get out and say, you know, what are the ways we can make sure that these things don't spread, or that people are healthy, and so we don't even have to worry about treating them. Now, there's obviously pros and cons to each method. Where, I mean, we're seeing one of the potential. We're seeing the con of of doing the public health method. I mean, it would be perfectly legitimate for us, given, you know, if we had, especially if we had, you know, we have a limited resource, so we're seeing the issue with that. But, you know, what if we could just treat everyone who got coronavirus? Well, then we wouldn't be shutting down the economy. It would look like we did, like with the H1N1 virus back in 2008. I was in college when that happened. And I was talking with my mom today. I'm like, it was a non-thing. Like, no one talked about it. It was like, you were a little nervous. Maybe I wasn't really nervous. I was like, if I get sick, whatever, I get sick. You know, you didn't really know it was a big deal. Whereas now it's, you know, but it's mostly because we don't want to overwhelm the hospitals is the big thing. But I don't know. I wonder how close we came to really overwhelming hospitals back then. It's hard. It's actually, I mean, we're getting that message now. Please don't read a conspiracy into this. We're getting the message now that hospitals are overwhelmed, especially in New York City. Like, they're completely overrun, and like there's people needing to like make these decisions whether who lives and who dies. I mean, that could have been happening. There could have been overruns at hospitals during that time. We just never heard about it. It's kind of, those are the two options. Do you treat it clinically, or do you try to get out ahead of it? And I didn't really answer a question there. I just asked more questions, which is really, that's the most important thing.
This is all very good. Thanks, guys. Okay, I actually have a comment about that, though. I saw something a couple days ago that the USCCB, I think, actually put out a statement that was basically urging hospitals not to play this game of like, we're going to start picking who we save because we're afraid that we're going to run out of ventilators. I also have another comment about this. It really bothers me the way that we talk about ventilators and stockpiling them. I was listening to something last week that was talking about how the country of Honduras has 8 ventilators in the whole country. Now, granted, consider the size of Honduras versus like the size of the US. Like, I would bet Honduras is smaller than the state of Illinois. But they have 8 ventilators. I mean, Lurie's probably has a couple hundred ventilators all in and of themselves. Maybe not. Maybe they have, I don't know, John, do you know? Do they have
I don't know.
over 100? A couple hundred? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But in the US, like, Trump gets up at the press conferences and talks about how we're stockpiling like tens of thousands, and we're handing them out to other countries to because they need them. But we're also stockpiling them for our own, you know, like New York needs them, Chicago needs them, whatever. I just don't appreciate the way that we talk about that, like as though we can't seem to get enough, but we're not running out yet. Chicago hospitals, I don't know. I have a lot of questions about it, to be honest. I have a lot of questions.
Again, the supposedly Italy
conspiracy theory territory very quickly.
Supposedly Italy was making those decisions, though. Like, as Kevin was saying, New York was preparing for. Italy was having to make those decisions about ventilating one patient or another. So
Italy for sure. I'm
yeah, I
questioning
mean,
whether or not
it's
in
a
the US
valid
that's
right. But the idea that it could happen is not totally out there. It's just a question of at what volume it would. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a bunch of different things that play into it about how they decide, how they would have to decide if it came to that. But like you said, I haven't heard of that happening in the United States yet. So thankfully.
Jumping back real quick to the original prompt here, what exactly was the USCCB saying about?
Oh, did I not get to that? Sorry. Okay, the USCCB was just urging US hospitals not to play that game, like not to get into this. Like, we're going to start looking at people's, their preconceived,
pre-existing conditions.
Thank you, pre-existing conditions, and their age and some of these other things, and then decide whether or not we're going to treat them. They were basically urging US hospitals not to play that game. I don't know how I appreciate any pro-life statement from the USCCB because we don't get it very often, but I don't know, sorry, I don't know how they could avoid that if we got to that point. But I also
Right.
don't think we're at that point.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, you wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to avoid it, but.
So, okay, like talking specifically about businesses being shut down in certain parts of the country. Trump made the comment that is the cure worse than the disease? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I think the difficult thing is we probably never will actually know, because if the shutdown succeeds, then you'll have plenty of people saying, wow, we didn't actually need to shut down. Just, you know, if it does its job, it'll seem like we did too much. So, yeah, I don't think you can really make that statement that it was definitively worse than the disease or not.
Well, I think for what it's worth, I think specifically what he said was something along the lines of, we let the cure be worse than the disease. Which,
Am I
I
being
mean,
fake news right
I'm
now?
not
Am I
the biggest
misrepresenting
fan of Donald Trump's
what
tweets,
actually
but,
said? Sorry, Evan, go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
but no. I mean, you got the basic thrust of the point. I just think his quote is fine. I think there was a lot of outrage about it, and this isn't to say that his quote, I mean, that all the actions that he's taken have been perfect. I certainly am no expert, but I think it's a fair concern. We do have to be worried about whether the cure is worse than the disease. And I'm not saying that the cure would have been or is, but I think it's something that we should be taking seriously, as there might come a point where we have to make a decision between reopening or not reopening. And there are a lot of factors to take into account.
I think that once we hit May and it does come to that we have to actually start having this conversation about bars and restaurants, or I don't know, clothing stores, that I think everyone's anticipating opening in May. So if it gets to that point that then Pritzker, I think Trump said today that it was up to the states, that Pritzker or whoever else decides that they're not going to let businesses reopen. I think that's when you're going to start to see people like getting visceral. And the thing that is problematic, and there's a lot that's problematic about it, I think it's problematic, where's the country getting this money for the grants and the loans that they're putting out there right now? But also, there are a lot of stipulations attached to a lot of these. And there's a lot of confusion. So my sister works in commercial banking and my dad owns businesses. So there's been constant conversation about what do these loan applications actually mean when we're talking about payroll, you know, and all these other things. And then what kind of expectation will it be? Will there be for the businesses when it comes time to decide if the loan is actually forgivable or not, because that's not necessarily guaranteed. So they could find that now these businesses are going to have to turn around and pay for all of this stuff after they've received this giant check in the mail that they thought was going to help them get through the next couple months. And now they're in debt. So that's where the question becomes, and it's like totally the blind leading the blind. The SBA hasn't done any, minimal guidance on this. So like, I don't know what, I think it would be really hard for May to come and all these state leaders and Trump to say, okay, now you have to be closed for another month because we can't risk. And that's the other thing too. Sorry, someone else say something, please, because I'm just
Well, it's not just businesses, it's people. I mean, like, the American people have been, I think, apart from like you see, of course, no matter what, you're going to need conspiracy theorists and people saying this is all bogus. But I think the American people have been pretty patient overall with how they're taking this. I mean, you don't see any crazy things happening outside. And if you continue like this it can only last so long, this stay in place order. because as John said, like people are going to be like, well, it's not spreading. And so can you making the connection back and forth between, is it, is it it's working because we're staying in place. I just think like, it's not just businesses. I mean, asking the American people to do this. I mean, there's, rumors that it happens all the way through some, I mean, can you imagine if they actually, I just physically think that they're going to deal with way more issues if they actually try to do this longer, more than just business. I mean, you're talking about like the morale of the people. You're talking about there's a lot of things that you're gonna deal with, and you've basically said, we've done this to flatten the curve, and it seemingly has in a lot of places slowed the amount. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people in hospitals, but it's slowed the amount that could be in hospitals. The fact where everyone is getting treated who can get treated, even though some hospitals, especially in New York, are very crowded. But you can't turn it into extending this all the way to a vaccine or something like, it's, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to close this out, but it's, you can't, like, this is, you can't ask this for much longer. You really, not into summer. You just cannot do it into summer. You're gonna deal with way more issues than you're rioting. I mean, it could get way worse than, in a sense where the cure is now worse than the disease.
I'm sure there's some date that they're looking at.
Do you think so though? Like it's one of those where I guess they are.
What I'm more referencing is like there's some date, whether it's like, I don't know, May 15th, where if they continue it past X date, they're gonna have to start having like calling in the National Guard or something to keep people.
Which is insane. Which is
whatever date it is. I don't know. I don't know what it would be, but yeah, people aren't going to tolerate it much longer.
The other thing about this, and Kevin and I were speaking about this the other day, is, obviously the flatten the curve mentality. You're doing that more, probably primarily so that we're not overwhelming the infrastructure system. But, but at the same time, you might be flattening the curve, like the cost in that realm, but, economically, psychologically, spiritually, like there's so many other costs that are so hard to measure, right? And maybe the economic ones we could actually put some kind of approximate dollar sign on, but there's so many other costs of quarantine that just like we can't measure. And so, at some point, does the government have a date in mind where you just lift the thing completely, or do you start gradually allowing people to come back? I was speaking with my dad the other day, and he's saying, if I'm going to be brutally honest, I do my job actually even a little bit more efficiently from home than I do in the office. And I think like my company is starting to realize that too. Just because like there's certain things that you can do working from home. And so, there's probably a lot of white collar jobs to where people could probably could stay in quarantine. But then you have, and then you have a lot of small businesses. You allow those people to go back to work so they can keep their businesses alive, and at least get some kind of flow back in the economy. And then also just, when you coop people up for this long, sometimes with people that just, can psychologically just throw them completely off, there's that cost too. And so I would certainly be in favor of just kind of gradually allowing people to go back. Now, who and how do you determine that? I mean, gosh, that would be a fight, I know, but
right.
I
feel like it's almost certainly going to be a soft opening, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. That's really funny that you said that, Dan, because my sister's boyfriend said that the other day, that he is afraid that his work is going to decide that he can just work from home from now on and that he'll never have to go into his office again. But he hates that idea. And then the other thing that I've been thinking about today, I was like really thinking about this because I was talking to a friend of ours who is in Slack with us and lives by himself and is like really kind of struggling a little bit with being alone, and was struggling yesterday when he was alone on Easter. And that's like a really, really hard thing. And the other, like, okay, the other thing too is I have another friend who works in healthcare, is a PA on a pediatric floor where there are some COVID patients. And so all of her roommates have actually moved out to avoid contact with her because she's been exposed. And so same thing, she's by herself. So now we're isolating these people who actually probably need the community and the companionship in this time more than other people, because they're really experiencing this. And I wonder what the mental fallout, and I think, like Dan, I think you said it well, psychological and spiritual fallout of that will be. I also wonder, like, Zach obviously isn't on, but Zach talks a lot about what will the spiritual fallout of not having any public sacraments be. And I don't know the answer to that question. On the one hand, I can't imagine it would be good. But on the other hand, I said this last week, I do feel like there is a heightened sense of longing that is a good thing. Like desiring the sacraments, I think, is a thing that most Catholics probably don't experience in their lives. Desiring, not even in the sense that they're desiring them because they can't have them, but just desiring them because they, like, in the sense that they want to be there. And I don't know, my mom has talked forever about, like, our church is going to have to change, and the way that it's going to have to change is that we're going to have to, like, pare down, like it's just going to have to get smaller so it can be richer or something. And I don't know what this is going to look like. I'm really curious to see how this all plays out with the churches. If we see
yeah, Father Steve was telling us,
I don't know, I don't necessarily think that we'll see more people in the pews.
Yeah, that's definitely up for debate. Father Steve was telling Kevin and I think one of our first days here, he was saying, Pope Benedict XVI has always been talking about having just like a smaller, leaner church, and you think that that'd be something that'd be good for us. Now it's obviously, you have to kind of think about that when it's like, wait, having less people, how is that a good thing? And maybe that's its own discussion, but there's also the question of just like, are people sitting at home and they're like, man, I really am longing for the sacraments. And like Mary Kate, I know you've mentioned that. I called a donor today to the seminary, and she was talking about how desperate she is to receive communion. But I think there's a lot of people that perhaps if this coronavirus hadn't happened, that were probably going to fall through the cracks. Like they were just going to eventually stop practicing. And this may actually have caused them to be like, well, that's it. But you hope that's not the case. And obviously we're bound to the sacraments, and God isn't. It's not like, well, there's no sacraments, and God's like, well, no grace for all these people who aren't receiving, right? Well, that's it. Coronavirus beats me. How is God working? He's doing something. But what it looks like, who knows?
Well, in the same mindset, like I heard a homily maybe 5 years or so ago that was talking about how persecution can be good for the church, and that like fire only burns up the dry branches, right? So it's probably a similar mindset here with the coronavirus, is that like you said, Dan, it's kind of hard to reconcile the idea that a small, like less people is somehow good or whatever, but like the idea that the people that are well fed and really like strong in their faith are going to grow stronger, and the people that might have been irreverent at mass, receiving unworthily, et cetera, just kind of going through the motions. You of course always want to convert them and bring them in, but I see it going like both ways. Like if you ask, is the church going to get or are people going to be more on fire for the faith, or are they going to be less on fire? I think it's both. I think it's people just going in two opposite directions depending on where they started from.
Agreed.
Yeah, we use that Pope Benedict quote gets used a lot. I see the future of the church being smaller but stronger, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. But I don't think that we as a church take that quote seriously, and I think this is going to be the thing that actually forces us to take it, because part of that leaner church is going to look like what it looks like in Chicago right now and several other dioceses where churches are closing or they're combining, and you'd have to like, in order to say like, yes, a leaner, stronger church is what we need or what would be best for the church, well, you'd have to be fully willing to accept that a church like, God forbid, St. Alphonsus could be shut down, and just because we're going to combine with Our Lady of Mount Carmel, and we're only going to use one church, and St. Alphonsus is closed forever. And so we use that quote all the time, and I think it sounds nice, but I don't think the church as a whole, and even on my level, like, I say that renew my church is necessary, but like if St. Al's was on the chopping block, I'd be fighting tooth and nail till they like, you can't lose this church.
Sure.
It's too beautiful. And so I think our hand is now maybe even going to be forced more than it was before. And these difficult decisions are going to be almost made for us. Now, please do not read this. This is St. Al's this is not me saying like hint, St. Al's is going to get closed. Not at all.
Oh my gosh.
I have absolutely no insight. I probably have even less insight than other people do.
Yikes.
First hot take of the night.
Yeah.
That was purely for example. Do not hear what I'm not saying.
This is what happens when we can actually hear
Do
what he's
not
saying.
hear what I'm not saying.
This is what you guys were missing last week when I was hear it.
Oh man.
But
No.
for real, it's like renew my church. Like in theory, it's maybe it's not the best organized or run thing right now. I think it's very necessary, but it's of course, as all things, it's always nice when it's the other church. It's the church on the south side that's struggling.
Yeah.
They need to combine. But like now, my church, no, you don't understand. Like we're doing fine.
Right.
Like. That quote by Benedict it has.
So if you don't want your parish to close, continue to give every Sunday.
For real, and millennials, you
Locations,
especially, we suck at giving. I'm part of this.
Yeah. Oh,
But I think the thing with Renew My Church though that we forget is that what's happening in like the physical brick and mortar infrastructure aspect of the church is reflective of what's happening in the hearts of the people. And so I think that we have like Catholicism in this country and maybe in the world, I don't know, but specifically in the US for sure, is a very cultural idea. Like I went to Catholic schools, I'm Irish, whatever. I'm Catholic. I like root for Notre Dame football, whatever. But like, sorry.
Not all of us.
But like then you have the people who are actually and those people are Catholic. Sorry, no offense to those people, but like, and then you have the people like, I think it's the same, Kevin, like it's to your point in Chicago, it might be true that we have all that going on that we have. Sorry, Evan went to Notre Dame, I forgot. We have all that going on. But also what we have going on in Chicago is we have like an incredibly vibrant and alive Catholic community that is like liturgically invested and like actually
it still doesn't give money on Sundays.
Yeah, I mean we have that. I agree, and we Chicago and the cities that I've been to has probably the best young adult community in the country of any major U.S. city. I mean, it's still Chicago still has, per the amount of practicing Catholics you have out there, and even the ones who are culturally Catholic and still go, way too many parishes. I mean,
totally, and that's kind of my point. Is like as we're shrinking all of this down, I don't know. It's like the more vibrant pieces will show themselves. You know what I mean?
For sure. I agree. And that's why I say there's a lot of truth in Benedict saying, and it's a good thing. But like, I think there's a lot of people, whether it's the cultural Catholics or the priests or the bishops, who are not, we say that's a nice thing, or that sounds great, but they aren't actually prepared to deal with, the reduction in giving, the smaller crowds, there's a real thing that comes with that there's a lot of good, and there's just a lot of things that are uncomfortable you have to deal with that we say we're ready for, but I don't think we are. That's my only point. I just
I
think
feel
that
like we need more
Okay, that's fair.
committees put together to.
Oh yeah,
study.
for several, way more committees. Yeah, we're contractors, bring the contractors for
That's right,
sure.
That's right.
That's a great way to do it. Oh geez, drink to that.
We're gonna take the church public.
Oh geez.
IPO.
Oh yeah,
Save
there
the
we go.
church, man. Give it to the U.S. economy.
Oh my gosh.
Perfect. I've been giving to a lot of things the U.S. economy right now. It's doing real well.
All right. Buy church stock, America.
So long as you make
Church
it,
stock.
so long as you make it common stock, they don't have voting rights. So you're just like,
I was gonna say, this is
yeah.
not a democracy. You don't get any voting rights.
Wow, we should just use that. We should. I think there are some people who need to understand that about the Catholic Church, actually, though. Big yikes.
That's very true.
Saying a democracy. Your opinion doesn't matter. Sorry.
I'm creating a petition on change.org right now.
Nice.
Make the Catholic Church publicly true.
Oh man.
There's a lot of chatter in the chat right now. If you want to,
Is there? I'm not looking at it.
Yeah, so I think
Great question.
Derek asked. I think Derek.
St. House is closing. Confirmed.
I swear.
What?
Save St. House.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin O'Malley
Save
with
St.
the
House. David,
Kevin
go
O'Malley
ahead.
once again with the quote of the night so far. So Derek, I believe this is Tim's friend Derek, if I had to guess.
Derek
asked-
and Tiffany, hello.
Yes. So can the government fix both at once, meaning the economy and public health? Or are they going to switch their focus are they going to have to go back and forth every few months? And I think I think that the answer is no, they can't fix both at once. At least that's my opinion. You can't fix both at once. But you know, this I don't.
It's
I don't know,
mitigation is what it is.
Okay,
Right?
but can you even go back and forth? Like you know, if it's this constant like shut down, like even in places, like can you whipsaw the American public like that? Can you expect businesses to like, I guess, adapt their business model? So like, okay, now we have to always prepare for if we go into quarantine.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think the answer to that is we have to mitigate the fallout from either extreme, right? Which is wherein lies the fact that we can't come to a conclusion, us six. I mean, we can try, but I don't
What are you
think
talking about? This is literally why we're doing this.
That's right.
Taking
Wow.
all the
I missed
questions,
that
all the
memo.
problems.
Uh,
Sorry, just kidding.
Mary Kate and
We're gonna
Tim
solve 'em
have
right now.
the answers.
Yeah.
I'll take the church public.
Take the church. Hashtag take the church public. I'm gonna write that in the chat. Okay, keep going, John.
You can't win comment of the week if you're a panelist. It doesn't
Aw,
work that way, Mary
man.
I
Kate.
agree.
Are you
So-
kidding me? Who wrote
Yeah,
those rules?
Evan,
People
David wants to
smarter
know
than
what dorm
me.
you were in.
He has to unmute himself.
Sorry, I missed that.
What dorm were you in?
Evan's like
Notre
listening to
Dame.
a podcast. He's not even listening to us anymore.
Are you talking about at Notre Dame?
At
Yeah.
Notre Dame, yeah.
Just woke
Oh,
up.
No, the
so I
dorm
went
you
there
lived in
for graduate school. So at
In other
Notre Dame,
words-
I wasn't in one of the residence dorms, but I
man.
did stay in the graduate housing.
So you
Okay,
went
right.
to Notre
Which is now
Dame.
torn
Okay, yeah, I
down.
gotcha. Yeah.
Wow, Kevin.
What?
I
I went to the University of Maryland. Yeah, I mean, like, no, I didn't. Like, not at all.
to Evan's credit, he doesn't talk about Notre Dame hardly at all. So
Did anyone
you wouldn't
acknowledge
know
that
you
Zach
wouldn't know
wrote
you went
very
there.
early on?
I just gotta call it
Dubstep
Yeah,
Gregus.
You know it.
Oh,
Not tonight.
So,
so
it's great. No, not tonight, Kevin. I love it. We can hear everything you're saying.
smarter
Sorry.
people.
I'm sorry, everyone. This is what you were missing last week.
Well, this is great.
Smarter people than me are
David.
figuring out what the break-even point is between the economy and public health, and I trust them to do that more effectively. It's not going to go. It can't go back and forth. You can't give people a taste of freedom and then say, okay, go ahead and quarantine again. So there will be a point, hopefully soon, where, like I mentioned before, I think it's going to be a soft reopening, so to speak, of the economy, and we'll go from there until we're back to as normal as things can be after something like this.
All right. So David brings up a point. I think we might have gotten to this a little bit last week, but he says, some people are a little too desperate to receive the Eucharist.
Depends what you mean by too desperate, David.
Well, I mean, if your faith, if all your faith revolves around the sacraments, I know it sounds crazy. It's crazy to think maybe, but like if that's all your faith is the sacraments, then I mean, I kind of agree with the fact that there's a little too desperate to receive. If you can't exist without the Eucharist,
Angels could be jealous of
I got to be really careful to not be
the ability to receive the Eucharist.
Say that again.
If angels could be jealous of men for anything, it would be their ability to receive the Eucharist.
Correct. And so,
how many of the saints had periods of time that they were not able to receive the Eucharist? A lot of them.
I mean, Maximilian Kolbe. I mean, you name that. There's a ton of
very many.
A lot.
Just because, like, I don't know. I saw that brought up on Twitter a lot too. When people would complain about not being able to receive the Eucharist, the response was always like, "Oh, well, so many saints weren't able to," which is fair. I can still be holy in the absence of it, but me wanting to receive the Eucharist doesn't make me less holy. Doesn't make me more holy either, but like, it's just, desiring and having that sense of loss it's not so easily put aside by saying, oh, well, other people can't receive it too.
Well, would it take you to a schismatic mass?
No.
Or yeah.
Yikes! Who's going to schismatic masses?
I'm not bringing up his. I'm not naming his name on this holy chat here.
No, that's a problem.
But it's it's not schismatic per se, but definitely not in union with the church. Anyway, I think that's the broader picture is the desperate, and it's a weird way to. It's trying to figure out how the best way to really put it. Because John, you're spot on. Like it should be a pain in our soul, in our heart, in our life that we can't have access, and there should be a desperation to be like, you listen to Ignatius of Antioch, like all the saints who have across the ages who have talked about receiving the Eucharist. But if your faith revolves solely on the sacraments and not on anything else, then I think there needs to be an evaluation. Now, it still feels weird to say, because like a lot of we should, as a Source and Summit, the Eucharist should be the center of that. And what happens when you don't receive it? That things fall apart. It's I'm trying to probably accentuate kind of like what I think David means.
I would almost.
What I think.
If the desperation, like you mentioned as your example, if it takes you to schismatic mass or something, like, then sure, that would be too desperate. That would be disobedience to your bishop or what have you. But
well, okay, I see this as there's numerous issues at play here. It's not just an issue of like, do I want the Eucharist enough to drive 3 hours to go to a mass? That's not the issue. The issue is that if you're in a particular diocese and the archbishop or the bishop or whoever has said, we're not doing public masses, priests do not provide public masses for the laity. And the reason why is, I feel like there's this attitude right now that it's like, all of a sudden people are acting like the US church is like the Chinese Catholic church, where it's like government run and it's not legit. And so everyone's like, well, we can do whatever we want. We don't have to listen to the bishops. And there's no like obedience factor at play here, but obedience is a real player in this. I think obviously there's a conversation to be had about what's the, I don't know. I think maybe that has to be discerned, but there's an obedience factor at play here. The other piece of it is the bishops providing the sacraments should not be contingent on whether or not I personally need or feel like I need it. Does that make sense? Like, I don't have a right to the Eucharist. I don't have, like, it's not, I don't know. And actually, did I say this last week? Actually, I don't know if I said this. I said this in our practice, that this is the issue we get into with denying the Eucharist to politicians who support abortion publicly. It's this whole thing of, well, we can't deny them the Eucharist. It's the same type of thing, right? That we take this attitude with the Eucharist that everybody has a right to it, and we can't tell anybody if they can't have it or not. And we can't put any perimeters on that at all whatsoever. Meanwhile, very, very clear scenarios that are publicly scandalous are going unchecked because the church is afraid to tell people you cannot receive the Eucharist. So I think that it's the same type of thing, that we have to put the Eucharist in its proper place. And I'm not necessarily saying I know what that is. I'm just saying that I don't think we each personally have a right to access to the Eucharist. I think that's very clear based on the fact that there are Christians all over the world, even in countries that are developed, who do not get to receive the Eucharist on a regular basis.
So, yeah. So
I've been
Mary
waiting
Kate,
for
so-
Dan to chime in.
So I'm as you were saying all that, I'm trying to look up Vatican II because at some point in Vatican II, and maybe Kevin or Tim, you can help me out with this. So they talk about how the laity has a right to.
Not John or Evan.
Okay, well, just because like we've like done.
Young seminary boys, it could be you.
Actually, I only want to hear from John. So, but we talk about how the laity has a right to what the priest can what the priest something that the priest provides to them. I don't know if they specifically say the sacraments or if it's just pastoral ministry in some form. I don't remember what it says in one of the documents, and I'm sorry I couldn't look it up by the time I started talking. So Mary Kate, so individually, do you have an individual right to the Eucharist? So I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, when you talk about like, should you be receiving or not? So like with a right comes a duty, and so like you have a duty to be in a state of grace if you're going to
Right.
sacrament. Now the church collectively has a right to the sacraments, and so now obviously now the bishops can implement like what that's going to look like, and of course in this situation, they say that it's there'd be greater cost for us to be receiving the sacraments as opposed to not doing so, but. I don't know. Can you say, can people come back to the bishops and say, well, we have a right to the sacraments, and so they need to be provided to us because there's, this is going too far. I mean, the bishops have the final say on that. So I don't think the laity could override the bishops based on like what they would say, like we have a right to the sacraments. But I think it's a extremely valid point to where it's just like how long can you deprive people of the sacraments if the cost. I mean, if we have a zombie virus going around, okay, that might be a little bit different than coronavirus, but how far
like actual zombies.
Kevin knows I like to use the example of coronavirus versus zombie virus. We have something that's bad and something that's really bad. I don't know. Maybe some people think zombie.
No, that's good.
I don't know. This is how I try to put things together, but. And I mean, this goes back to the question, just like, so how serious to public health is the coronavirus? And from there, how far do you go? And so, I don't know, depending on how long we have this quarantine, I could see the bishop saying at some point, okay, we're going to open churches back up in some limited capacity, perhaps just to hear confessions in a very limited or a very protective capacity. Or I don't know if they could allow communion services where they could distribute communion and not have the mass. I don't know. This is kind of thinking on my feet here, but yeah, I don't know how long can you. I don't know if I'm not actually answering the question, guys. I'm not trying to.
Further discussion.
That's the theme of the night, is not actually answering the question, I believe. So
Six of us can. We only have one solution so far, which is taking the church public. We need more, guys. Get working.
Dan. You'll make a great bishop someday.
Oh no.
Well.
Oh no.
Okay.
Sorry.
So no one really responded to my question of whether or not it was okay for me to bring this up. So I'm just going to do it. You all just have to deal with it. So Pope Francis today. Does anyone else have anything to say on that topic? Because I was going to shift gears.
Shift away.
Did you guys see the stuff? I don't know what you're saying, John. So the Pope Francis wrote a letter to the popular organizations, the World Meeting of Popular Organizations, that I have to admit, did not read the whole letter, read an excerpt of it. It's not that long, it's 2 pages. I think I sent it to you guys. He suggested that they look at a universal basic income. I'm curious about takes on this. Like, your take could be as general as Pope Francis has every right to make that suggestion, and it's probably well-founded. Or your take could be something else. But I'm curious what you guys think about that.
I haven't looked into it too much, so maybe you can provide some more context. This is a recent statement.
This was I think 2 days ago.
2
It's
days
in a
ago.
letter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, what prompted this, especially amidst the coronavirus. If this is
Let me-
something that he sees that, like, oh, people are losing their jobs. Now is the time to talk about universal basic income. So I don't know what the context of it is. Seems slightly out of place to me. Like, there's bigger fish to
The
fry.
context, yeah. So I think the context, Tim, was him's like workers' rights, basically. So yeah, I think it's coronavirus. People are out of jobs. I'm gonna pull it up right now.
Yeah, I have it up.
Do you?
Yeah, if you want, here's the so it's in the context of talking about globalization and the people who are excluded from the benefits of globalization, specifically street vendors, small farmers, construction workers, dressmakers. I mean, I think especially in especially like second and third world countries where the lockdown is becoming unbearable and you're literally cut off from any sort of form of income. And he says this may be the time to consider a universal basic wage, which would acknowledge and dignify the noble essential tasks you carry out. It would ensure and concretely archive the ideal, at once so human and so Christian, of no worker without rights. So that's the context of the quote.
Evan, why are you making that face?
You're still muted.
Still muted. Oh man, can you figure it out?
Can you guys hear me now? Am I?
Yeah.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay. I'm making that face because while I think it's fine to suggest looking into universal basic income, and in fact, we certainly should look into it because we should look into all of these sort of radical new economic ideas and try them out in small populations and see what happens and all that. But I'm pretty dubious about how effective this would be as a policy, and also first of all, I dislike to some extent sort of the mentality of ideological attachments to any kind of economic system, and it seems like he's suggesting this from an ideological point of view rather than must have ideal foundations, I guess. Like this is what economics are trying to provide. Like you have to be practical in your approach to economics, and you can't be an ideological capitalist or an ideological communist or an ideological universal basic incomeist. And I feel like that's the argument that he's trying to make.
Well,
this is the way to ensure the dignity of the worker.
And the other thing is, I don't know enough about economics, but I think, general broad principles, rights of the worker, good things to make statements on, but blanket statements worldwide, if you're trying to say that this is what should be implemented in every country, I don't really see that as, whether it's appropriate or not is a whole nother issue, but like whether it's effective or not, like for Pope Francis to have a statement that says every country needs to implement some form of universal basic income. What works for America, we know, is not necessarily going to work for, a country in the Middle East where everything is different. So I just don't think it's very effective.
I guess that's what I'm saying is where you use the term works for. And I think that that's the key term in economics, which is what makes it different than a lot of other areas, is that economics, like it does boil down to a lot, like this is about what works. And a lot of times people with radically different views about economics are striving towards the same ends. And it really is a question just of policy practicality.
Mm-hmm. Practicality, and then like effectiveness as well. Like, there
exactly.
are certain things that we obviously have to work against if communism doesn't hold up the inherent dignity of the person or something like that, right? But in the end of the day,
or if capitalism doesn't, for that matter, as well.
Of course, yeah, right. And in the same, in separating all that, getting all that out, then it's really just like what works is the question. What is the most effective way for a particular economy to run? And I don't think it's going to be the same for every country.
I mean, I don't think there's anything in this letter. I mean, maybe it's the most extreme he's talked about it in terms of offering a solution in the form of a universal basic wage. I mean, Pope Francis from the very beginning has talked about the marginalization of workers by the global system, and what can we do to bring these people back onto the stage where they have a voice, where they are not ignored, where they're not he even uses like, I know you'll never receive the recognition you deserve because you are truly invisible to the system, because these big world markets, they don't necessarily care about the individual worker, especially those that are doing farm work in Guatemala. I mean, that's the nature of the system, and I mean, he's not necessarily wrong about that. Now the question is, is this him actually saying like, this is we should have this basic wage, or is it a way to get the conversation going?
So yeah, Kev, this is my question for you, because I think that we've talked a lot about social policy in Slack. Well, a lot. I don't know. We've talked about it here and there. Kevin, John, I don't know. Sometimes I look at you guys and you're laughing, and I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, whatever. So we talked about social policy, and my thing is that I don't think it's dignifying to just give someone something like, okay, I don't want to use terminology to make it sound like Tea Party talking points. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to be that person right now. I'm really not. I swear.
Continue, Mary Kate.
No. I'm really, really not. Okay, actually, I'm not even going to say the words. I'm going to tell a story about. Okay, so I'm working on this project right now. I'm working with some people who want to start a full-service women's healthcare clinic in Chicago. We're just it's all ideas right now. It's all theoretical right now. And I had a conversation with a pro-life doctor. The idea of a full-service women's healthcare clinic would basically be like OBGYN, but also, like basically anything you'd need on the spectrum of fertility. So from the time you're like a teenager and you like are just getting your period, sorry guys, all the way through menopause. And what makes it like full service is that you're providing services for women who have health insurance, who can write a check and pay for their services, or you're giving services to women who are on Medicaid, or you're providing free services for women who just like can't pay in any shape or form. And the idea behind this is that it's like a challenge to Planned Parenthood, right? That like Planned Parenthood claims they provide full service women's healthcare. Obviously that's false. So we want to provide the full spectrum of services. And so I was talking to this doctor who's a pro-life doctor in the Chicago area a couple of days ago. I was asking him, what do you think of this idea? Do you think this would work? How could we fund this? Yada, 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 whatever. And his comment to me was, the issue I have found, and he's been in practice for 15, he said his own private practice, I think 10 or 15 years now, and has taken Medicaid in the past. And his comment is, it's a problem to give something away for free without asking anything in return, because then it decreases the value of that thing. So then when you're giving something to someone, it's inherently lacking in the dignity that we would want to provide to that person, because the value goes down when you don't ask anything of them in return. And so I think with material goods, that's very hard to apply, because with like charity, we can, I don't know, like I think about like charity as like doing a service to someone, like being a caretaker for someone who's disabled. Okay, on the one hand, they're receiving something from you that they can't return. They can't give anything in return. But on the other hand, it is you are receiving something from someone by them allowing you to perform an act of charity to them or upon them. You're receiving something from them in that instance by them. Like someone explained it to me, it was maybe a spiritual director one time explained it to me that like it's an act of charity to receive an act of charity from someone. Like you're providing them an act of charity.
Yep.
So with material goods, how do we equate those two things? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, how do we just not, because here's the other thing that we know to be true, that when you start giving something away for free, whether it's healthcare, a social service, whatever, the quality inevitably goes down because it just has no monetary value anymore. I mean, like this is what we see with like socialized healthcare, right? Like that's the primary concern, that the quality of care will go down if it's, so I'm genuinely asking, like, how can we provide social services for people? And in the case of like a universal basic income or whatever it might be, how can we provide social services for someone in a way that it's authentically dignifying and not just us saying to them, you can't do anything for yourself, so we have to do it for you, so we're just going to throw this money at you and you are now free to do with that what you will, which we know that's enabling it for some people, not for all people for sure, but for some people it enables a problem.
Well, yeah, so I think that's
I'm not implying anything specific, I'm just saying, like, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah,
John.
I think that's probably one of the key differences in this question we're tackling versus the idea of charity, right? Is giving someone charity, even if you say it's the same exact amount of money that I would be giving someone under a universal basic income. But if I give them that same amount of money, charitably speaking, I would have no say over what they do with it. It's me giving them this money. Whereas when it's an economic principle and we're trying to solve an end, I think that is the key difference. Regarding the difference between what charity is and what universal basic income would be.
There's also kind of the issue of like the anonymity when something comes to you from the government. There's no face on it. It's one thing to get a check from some faceless entity, and another thing to get it from a person. And it's just a certain kind of like valuation that comes with that as well, because it also fosters that face-to-face relationship. And that's something that, to kind of more sort of to John's point, I can't remember. So, well, there it is.
If I gave you 20,
great point though, Tim.
Basically, if I gave you $20, you'd be less likely to waste it than if you got a check in the mail from nobody.
I mean, I don't know. If you gave me $20, I might be someone else.
I'd feel obligated to buy some sort of Malort or something like that. I don't know.
Or can I interest you in some Miller Lite? It is a fine Pilsner beer, spelled
now
different.
A word from our sponsors, right, John?
Miller Lite.
Anyway, Tim, did you finish your thought or no? Did you forget it?
Yeah.
About relationship.
I mean, bringing it back to like the gospel, that any type of social service, I think for it to be effective has to be, grounded in gospel values. And so talking about like a universal basic income, it's like, well, I mean, where would that come from? It would come from individual governments, and they're by and large not like the United States, like they're not like attuned to the gospel necessarily. And so like what does it really mean? So like there might be this higher value of like, oh yeah, there's a need for a universal basic income, but then on the lower level, individual country that's not necessarily attuned to those higher values is providing it, and suddenly they have kind of their own thoughts on it and they put their own stipulations on it. And going back to like the relationship, that like is at the point of charity is just to throw people money. Charity needs to be like a one-on-one, face-to-face kind of thing. And now I'm going to follow along with Dan. It's it's an easy thing to say, but then to actuate it and say, okay, this is what charity should look like, then that's a lot harder to do. So I'm just making
What does this look like?
pass.
It
Yeah.
looked like
So I'd make a great bishop too, actually.
we already knew that though. So. Mary Kate, to your point, I mean, like the point of social services is not to get people to be dependent on them, right? And like you want
theoretically in our minds, that's not the point. But
well,
anyway.
yeah, I mean, the again, I'm speaking of ideals here, right? And so like the goal is you want to give people the ability, and I know that, and obviously there are certain people that like they can't do that based on, it could be physical condition, it could be whatever. But like the goal is you want to be able to empower people to go forth and to be self-sufficient, or at least to be able to provide for themselves. I mean, even think of like the way that we give the sacraments, right? You don't go to confession to get your sins forgiven so that you can just go back and just do, and be stuck in like this pit of sin that you're in, right? It's like you're being given the grace so that you can be transformed. There's something that you go forth from that and something happens. At the resurrection, Jesus, he appears to them and he immediately sends them on mission, right? And so when it comes to social services, it's you've got to, a priest I was talking to, and I wish I remember exactly who it was. It's been during quarantine, but so it was really probably one of two priests. But he was talking about how just like
how many priests you been seeing?
Yeah, it's actually Bishop Tim Berryhill. But he's just talking about how it's like when you create a dependency in some of these neighborhoods, even like from like Catholic charitable organizations, what you're doing is you just keep people in poverty, and it may not necessarily be, I mean, in whatever resource or whatever it is that people need. And so you're trying to get people to be in some ways for them to take ownership of their situation and go forward. Now you can't do that with everyone, and I understand that, but that's the ideal.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm going to try to jump in the mind of Pope Francis. Actually, I'm not going to try to do that. I'll say
smart.
Yeah. So whenever I fight back against this stuff, which I do on Slack occasionally, in the sense of like charity versus more forced giving or governments doing this, is that if charity could take care of everything, then I would be all for that. Because I think from charity, I mean, charity by definition, in my definition of charity, I love defining things, is that like I give with no expectation of receipt, and that I would try to give the same way that Jesus gave, that there's no expected return. And if the world's needs, and especially the poor's needs, was taken care of by charity, then that would be fine. And I would think that'd be the preferred way, and all that, and in dignified ways where you're teaching them, and all these things. I think the main issue that I see is that, and why something like, I don't know how it would work, but the fact that like something like a universal basic wage would like at least make sense in my mind, is that you have all these people doing this work and they're not being dignified at all. It's they're doing this work and it's no one's seeing it, no one's giving them any sort of money for it, no one's trading for it. It's work that's being done with nothing in return, that if they were in a different situation, it should be getting a return. It should be, if they were in a different situation, they would be potentially making a lot of money. And so like if charity could take care of all those things, and if we could somehow, like, if charity could take care of everything, then great. But sometimes there needs to be like this almost forced kick in the butt of like, charity's not doing that. If we look around the world, it's not working. And so this is not me advocating for a basic universal income, because I don't, it's hard for me to like know how that would work, especially me as a engineer turned seminarian. I have no idea how the heck financials that would work at all. Like, and I think how do you practically make that work? I don't know if you can. And I don't really know if Pope Francis is necessarily saying like, yeah, for sure we should chase after this. But I think it's in the way I see it is that you have so many people out there that are doing work, they're not being dignified, and there should be some sort of return for them. There should be some sort of way for them to support themselves, and this is the way to do it, because right now their needs are not being taken care of.
I have 2 comments. First, what do I want to say first? Actually, wait, I'll respond. Okay. My comment about universal basic income and the potential for that is, I think that it's hard to like wade through, because from an economic standpoint, I think there's like an immediate problem that presents itself in that, is this going to incentivize people to just stop working? And then you have like a gap in the workforce at that point, or in like a particular service at that point. Like, okay, let's say, I don't know, maybe that's a dumb thing to say, because let's say, I don't know anything about the economy, by the way. This is like all just, I'm purely speculating. So Dan, feel free to jump in anytime.
If only we had some former accountants here. The one time you need us, people.
The one time you need us.
Go ahead.
My only comment is, I think that potentially presents an issue, that you have people who are going to be potentially incentivized to just no longer work because they don't have to, because they're making enough that they can get by without that work. My second comment, which is, I think, Kev, in a certain sense fits into what you're saying. David said in the comments, David is blowing up the comments right now. He's pissed. He said, why does it matter to the recipient who they receive charity from? Why do I, oh, sorry, I was reading the wrong comments. He said, if giving people things for free isn't dignified, doesn't that make charity super offensive? And then he was asking about like nonprofits and whatever. Okay, so here's my thing with receiving a service from a nonprofit versus the government. And I think maybe it hits on what Tim was trying to get at. Receiving a service from a nonprofit, and actually, and this goes back to what we were saying about individuals, like giving, charitable giving, all full circle, it's all related. So is that
wheels within wheels.
When you have full circle, we're using, like, do you see how I'm using the whole box again? I've actually gotten so close to the computer that my face is basically taking up the whole box at this point. So difference between receiving a service from a charity versus receiving something from the government. Nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with an individual receiving a service from a charity organization. I think that the difference is maybe what Tim was saying. It's that relationship aspect, that it's like the subsidiarity of it, right? So like, it's like the smallest competent source. So theoretically, a charity organization, and obviously we know this is not necessarily the case. There are a lot of huge charities in the country, but like theoretically, the charity would be the smaller, more personal way for someone to receive that service. As opposed to, and maybe that's what's more dignifying about it is the relationship aspect, like what Tim was saying, where with the government, you've got this person gets a check in the mail, which they're just reduced to a number at that point. How much is this person going to cost us until they die? This is, okay, example of this. In Washington state right now, they have stopped providing state Medicaid for certain patients, and instead they just administer they send them a letter in the mail that says, we're discontinuing your health care, whether it's chemo, insulin for your diabetes, whatever. Yeah. We are prescribing you the death drug, barbiturates, and this is the only option that's now available to you. And they're basically reducing these people to a dollar amount and saying, you're costing us too much money to keep you alive, so we're going to just tell you to literally kill yourself, quite literally kill yourself, overdose on barbiturates. So that's what we're looking at when the state is looking at people as a number, as opposed to an individual. You walk again, this is all theoretical because I know that there are big nonprofits, but you walk into a nonprofit organization asking for a service. And first of all, you have to show up, then you have to ask for it, which I think that's a very important piece of charity too, because I think that there's a very humbling, again, it goes back to, you have to receive that charity from them.
Like Tim was saying with relationship.
Yeah, you have to ask for it. And then there's like accountability isn't the right word. Yeah, it's just relationship. So it's different. There was something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. That was my primary point though. Is David arguing with me in the comments?
I think
which is good, by the way. We love it.
Yeah, I mean, his biggest thing is that we need to do more research on this, which absolutely we I fully agreed. Like I think, I don't know, like universal basic income. Like, do I know how would work and whatnot? I don't know. It comes back to like, you know, I think this came up on Slack with like taxes versus, you know, just giving where you want. And there's something obviously if I can give where I want, then I'm more inclined to give. If I knew my taxes weren't going to fund Planned Parenthood and, you know, embryonic stem cell research, and, you know, I'd be like, yeah, I'm glad I'm paying taxes. It's really good. And, you know, if I could earmark my taxes, it would be, you know, wonderful. But
If only the U.S. government had restricted funds.
if only. But like the charitable giving is like because by its nature you can't force it. I mean, this comes down to like, and this comes back to the conversation that Dan and I were having at 2 a.m. a few maybe it was last week, of like our trust necessarily comes down to our trust of the human race, and where I say like there is, you know, you can't, there's a certain level of trust that it's hard to have in the general population of any country, especially the United States, where to bring it full circle back to we brought things into a lot of circles. We had a lot of circles here going on.
Wheels within wheels.
Yeah, right. It's, you know, wheels all the way down.
Circles.
Circles all the way down. The like for coronavirus, why are we enforcing, you know, forced stay at home, where instead of like just tell people like, hey, it's best to stay at home, or we're not going to enforce anything? Because in my view, there's a portion of the population out there that would just go and do it anyway. Same with this thing of like.
And Dan thinks we should let those people just die.
No.
Whoa!
No. It's more of like, you know, dealing with the consequences, you know, more of like, you know, just dealing with the consequences. And there's, you know, you do that, and like, you know, there's virtue ethics, and like if you have too many rules, you know, eventually we stop ignoring those rules. I'm a textbook rule breaker. I don't like rules, and if I think a rule is stupid, I'm not going to follow it.
What textbook are you following to break those rules?
Oh, dude, you got me. See, I'm an idiot. And so anyway, where I was going is like, if you could like, you know, make Jeff Bezos give a big part of his income to like, I don't know. It comes down to like the charity, because charity is not forced. Like, how do you make sure that the people are getting the things that need to get taken care of are getting taken care of? And that's what I come down to, is that maybe it's just an overly cynical view of the general population, that there's a lot of things that would fall through the cracks, and that especially like the Guatemalan, you know, bean farmer is gonna totally, like, definitely fall through the cracks, much less, you know.
Did you say meme farmer?
I wish I did now. I absolutely wish I did.
That's what I thought you said.
I said bean farmer.
Okay.
But I wish I said meme farmer. That would have been.
Is Dan technically a meme farmer?
Oh, for sure. He's one of the best. Very fertile.
I'm sorry,
fields.
Kevin. Keep going. I want to hear the rest.
That's all. I mean, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but it's the sense of like the forced versus the unforced. But how much unforced can you deal with? And that's always my point of like, you know, why I sometimes tend towards big government. That it's basically there's someone that's forcing these things. Forcing people to do things that they don't necessarily want to, or give to the level like that they should be giving. So that's where I come down to.
I think we should just convert everybody.
There we go.
And then I don't know. That's just it. Just convert everybody. Never mind. Whatever. Yeah, Kev, I hear you. You're a better person than me, because to be honest,
Whoa.
I think it's, well, because
Ah.
Kevin,
Hot take number 3, everybody.
ouch, Dan. Are you roasting me or Kevin? I don't know.
I'm just saying that's a pretty.
Yes.
That's one of our. I'm just saying that's a pretty.
Kevin, no, I'm serious. Like, I have a lot of respect for people who, like Kevin, who are really convicted for providing for people on the social level, because I wouldn't say I don't have that conviction so much as I just think that, like, I don't know. I grew up in a rub some dirt on it household. So
I mean, I forgot who mentioned it earlier when we were specifically talking about economic policy, but they were saying that mostly the end goal of most people is the same, right? And in the same way, I think you and Kevin have
what do
the
you mean? What are you like?
Well-
What's the implied end goal?
the end goal is to have a strong economy in that respect. But for social services, the same common end goal you and Kevin both have is how to help everybody to the best way that it can be done. You just have different ways of going around it. And I'm sure it's some combination of, it's somewhere in between just letting people decide where they'll give their money to, and giving all your money to the government and letting them give it out as they, I mean, it's neither or, it's somewhere in between. And but to, like, I know your point when you said that Kevin's a better person than you isn't true by any stretch. He went to Michigan.
No way.
He went to Michigan, so obviously not.
Oh, getting
Oh.
blasted in the comments, getting blasted by here.
No.
So I just think that it's important to know that, like, we all here have the same end goal to help as many people as we can, and I think
By converting them to the Catholic Church.
by converting them to Catholic Church, which is the highest charity we can ever.
You ain't wrong.
David and Sam, social welfare is tied to abortion. David and Sam are saying we should talk about vaccines. I'm not going to do that.
That's a whole other whole other
But I
chat.
got so many opinions.
No. I don't.
No, we're actually not going to do that. I'm not going to talk about that.
Maybe another night.
If we're doing vaccines, Mary Kate, we're all muting, and I might take a nap.
No, we're not.
You have a lot to share on that.
I know it's dangerous territory. We're not doing that. But I will say that that's the other. I don't know if I meant to say this at any point. Did I interrupt someone? I feel like sometimes I start talking and I'm not actually aware if I'm interrupting someone.
Just go.
Okay.
If you did, we don't care.
Right.
I'm sure social welfare is tied to abortion. Okay, so this is one of the big issues with publicly funded healthcare. I'm thinking as I'm speaking. So basically, if we have publicly funded healthcare in any shape or form, whether it's currently what it is, or like a socialized healthcare system that's like single payer or something, we are writing abortion theoretically, unless pro-lifers suddenly take over the world and are able to write a pro-life socialized healthcare model, which was never going to happen. Theoretically, we are writing abortion into our law in such a way that we will never get rid of it, because you're talking about then you're eliminating the market. So there's not, I'm totally going to botch this, you guys. Basically, the competition's gone. So there's no space for pro-life competition. So it's literally only, abortion-minded healthcare providers. And this is problematic because, sorry, I know I'm like totally off on a tangent. I'm just saying it because David said this in the comments, but and like, it's just amazing. So my sister is a NICU nurse. So she works in the neonatal intensive care unit nurse at Lurie's Children's Hospital. And she talks a lot. She and I talk a lot. We did a podcast episode on it about like how doctors who are not of a pro-life mentality approach healthcare for babies who are chronically diseased or severely disabled, etc. And this notion that babies are born with like a terminal diagnosis or like a chronic prognosis, in the sense that they're that when you hear this phrase like this baby is not compatible with life, really it's self-fulfilling prophecy with those rates, because what will happen is the doctors will say this baby's not compatible with life, we're not going to provide care, and they just cut off all care for that child, and that baby's basically left to die. And so when you're dealing with a healthcare system like that, then you have parents who come in and they're not informed, and they're totally just like going in blind and just trusting their doctors. I hate, people say this, sorry, I'm not going to talk about vaccines, but people say this about the vaccine issue, that they're like, we just should trust our doctors. Here's the thing about trusting your doctor. Your doctor was brought up in their career in the healthcare system. So it's a positive feedback loop, in the sense that they're just repeating whatever they're hearing. And so when you have these doctors who have been around this culture through their entire careers, and they're like, oh, this baby has a terminal prognosis, instead of trying to care for this baby to see how long this baby will live, we're just going to stop providing care, then it feeds that feedback loop, because then you have these babies that die very early because there's no longer care for them. And they what was I going to say? It feeds that like rate, that death rate. Anyway, so in terms of abortion, absolutely, that's 100% true. Socialized anything from my perspective is tied to abortion. Like I don't know how you like separate them, because there will never be a pro-life socialized model of anything. Anyway, that's my comment. I'm done.
Not right now. Always, if you keep working at it, Mary Kate, it'll keep going. You're only just starting here.
We'll see.
Matthew Kelly talked about how if every Catholic in the United States voted along the lines of like Catholic teaching, that we would take over elections. It wouldn't even be close.
100%.
100%.
Yep.
And I just think like, and Mary Kate, I mean, I know you know in your own field of just like a lot of what you experience when you talk to people who are pro-choice is that they just like they don't know. They're misinformed, or they just don't know. Right? It's not like, well, I've looked at both sides and this one just makes more sense. At least in my experience. And so I feel like, can you have a pro-life, or can you have an ethic behind the healthcare system that is one that's against abortion and against euthanasia and all that kind of stuff? I think you can. Now, like when and all that stuff, okay, I gotta kind of throw that one out. But I mean, I think you can do it, because
we have that in different medical systems, right?
Sure.
So the fact that we aren't single payer, we aren't socialized, right, allows that to happen. So, the hospital I used to work for was Central Illinois based, Order of St. Francis, OSF. So there wasn't contraception provided. Yeah. There weren't abortions performed.
That's so rare.
You can have pro-life health systems, but it takes a market for them to be able to compete.
Yeah, and that's the big issue, is that there's definitely a market for it. Like, okay, talking specifically about Chicago, this is something I've been doing a lot of research on recently, and there's definitely a market for it. The problem is the infrastructure just won't sustain that kind of service, because it's sort of like it won't. Okay, like specifically with this doctor that I was talking to, he's a pro-life doctor. He has 11 kids.
Did he speak at Theology on Tap at St. Alphonsus?
Yeah, I'm not gonna out him, but yeah, he's awesome. Like, he's incredible. Yeah. He's a living saint, and he has kids he has to put through college, and he has a family, and because he lives his pro-life values, and so he's like, I want to provide this service for women who are like hungry for and in need, like truly in need of a pro-life women's healthcare service. But because of the infrastructure in Illinois, I cannot provide that to the extent that I want to, because it isn't cohesive with my own lifestyle, which is father of 11 children, has to care for his family. Like, it's just not a competitive place to be. And what's so interesting now, and I'm so sorry, you guys, now I'm going on a tangent about women's healthcare, but it's just so interesting now that, that they, like one of his popular clients, he's got like Catholic women are one of his super popular clients, but then obviously, but his other client that's like his average client is like a crunchy vegan, like climate change mom who's like worried about pumping her body with artificial hormones and just seemed to realize that since the 60s that we've been doing this, it actually doesn't make any sense. Which is like a super secular person, but I just think it's interesting that now we're like kind of coming full circle anyway. I don't even know why I needed to say that.
Say she's crunchy.
Yeah, I know that. Like, I was like,
Crunchy.
none of us know what that means. So,
Like,
You don't know what
I was
that means?
nodding
Is that
'cause
like a woman?
like a lingo in the field. Like, yeah, she was super crunchy, man.
That must be like a women thing. If there are any women watching, I know Marie was watching for a little while. She was texting me, like she would know what crunchy is. Crunchy is like your like all organic, vegan, like I don't know, no artificial, doesn't eat cow meat that has hormones in it.
and is
I've heard in the
vegan,
context of granola, because I've heard
Yeah,
people
yeah,
like,
that's
oh yeah,
right.
they're granola, and that's what I
Gotcha.
think maybe where the
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I
That's
thought you were
exactly
talking
right.
about specifically crunchy granola. Like,
Yeah.
that Nature Valley bar I had the other day.
Yeah.
It was quite crunchy.
I literally picture a Nature Valley bar in my head when I say that phrase, like
Nice.
crunchy. Yeah. Yeah, that's literally what it is, basically.
Oh,
Rudy
man.
went to my high school.
Rudy.
Rudy's a member of
Rudy,
basically a Catholic
Rudy.
political party. Is that
Rudy was
true?
offside. You know that, right?
The
Yep.
American Solidarity Party. I mean, there's like 10 of them. So,
Third party is it's a load of it. Don't
In
ever
our
vote
system,
third party.
yeah.
Anyone watching, don't vote third party. You're voting for whichever candidate you hate the most if you're voting third party.
basically,
We're
It's always the other
doomed
guy.
to vote for one
Always
of
the other
two
guy.
parties.
Yeah, we are. So just suck it up. Stop thinking you're going to get away with a third party.
Just overthrow the government.
And the only thing worse than a third party is writing somebody in. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just say no. Don't say I'm not that rude.
And if you do, write in either Mary Kate or John Trainer.
John, you'd probably win in like where are you from? You're from Central Illinois.
Yeah.
You look at you right now. You literally got the beard with the hat and the Miller Lite. You could put that on a political ad and you'd win every election you run in.
I'm a
in
man of the
Central Illinois.
people. I'm a man of the people.
Drinking cooler.
Man of the-
Oh, jeez.
Kevin's like, this is where I'm done.
By the way, John, I approve your hats, and you're celebrating the fire of Gar Foreman today, and I
That
cheers
is
to that.
precisely why I wore this hat, Kevin.
Good.
You can't see I'm wearing my shirt.
John Paxson is next.
Well, he got reassigned, right? He got reassigned, so he essentially was fired. But I'm wearing my Bulls shorts. I'm wearing my Air Jordans. I'm all in on the Chicago Bulls today. Finally doing something right. Let's go.
Finally.
And we got that documentary coming up, so looking forward to it. Great time to be a Bulls fan.
What's the documentary on?
Jordan, it's The Last Dance. It's
Oh, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Saw that.
All right,
Evan's trying to unmute himself. Hold on.
let's go. Oh, Evan. Go.
Unfortunately, I'm unmuting myself to say that my phone is about to die, so I have to bow out a little bit early.
He's been
But thank you
trying
guys for the conversation, and
See you,
we'll
Evan.
tune in next time.
Tune in
Bye,
next
Evan.
time.
See you later.
Hey, dude.
Oh, I like your shirt.
Yeah,
I didn't even see that before.
Second Bush, 84. Great president. All right, bye, guys.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye,
Evan.
Evan. Do you guys want to circle back really quick on what Dan sent? Because I think that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, go for it.
So real quick, just we were talking about the lady and having a right, and so in Lumen Gentium, paragraph number 37, basically what it talks about is how the lady have a right to receive the spiritual goods of the church from their shepherds, so from their pastors, from the priests, and from the bishops, and they are obliged to let the hierarchy know when their needs are not being met, and and it goes on a little bit, but before it says though, so the bishops are supposed to take that. They're supposed to take that input seriously, and then they need to make decisions. I mean, well, okay, so the bishops, but also priests, like they have to be aware of the needs of the people, right? But ultimately, it all falls on the bishops, and that was one of the big things of Vatican II. Is just what powers do the bishops have? And this is another example of, at the end of the day, the bishops do have the right to say it is better for, in this situation, for the laity to not be receiving the sacraments in public in the church because of the public health hazard. And if they agree on doing so, that's kind of like the final word on it. I don't think, and as much as we can complain about things that the bishops have done, I certainly don't think that any of them are ignorant of of so many people saying they want to receive the sacraments. And I'm sure they've received so much of that feedback and criticism. But yeah, so we may not be actually saying anything new here, but it is up to the bishops. And so we just hope and we pray that the bishops make the best decision.
Hope and you pray, and you can contact them in any way.
We do a lot of hoping and praying in the church.
A lot of hoping and praying. That's right. That's right.
Well, anybody got any last thoughts? Is there anything we were going to talk about that we didn't talk about?
Not that wouldn't take another huge conversation.
Oh, that's true. We could do that next
stuff
week.
For next week, yeah.
Because we didn't talk about the media thing, right, Kev? Which I think is a really good idea.
Yeah, we can say that for next week.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just spoiler alert: the top of the media that you should pay attention to is this YouTube live stream right here.
Yeah, that's if you're taking in any other media and not this, then I mean,
you might want to bring that up in confession.
For real. Yeah.
When you get to go back.
When you can.
When you get to go back.
Yeah. For real.
Nice.
Everyone should be reading. If you haven't actually read the Vatican II documents, by the way, read them because they get misquoted so often, and it breaks my heart every time it happens.
And did I send you guys in Slack that excerpt from Vatican II that was in that book, Discerning Beauty, that I was like, a redeeming facet of Vatican II? Did I?
Well, there are lots of redeeming facets.
I know. I know. Trust me. I am ignorant of Vatican II. I know it.
Everyone is.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't have to say it, but there's an excerpt in there that's really good about like how Vatican II was like essentially the first church document that formally acknowledged religious freedom in the individual.
The most controversial. That was technically the most controversial of all the decrees and constitutions the church put out. It was the most
that
voted.
Got me so fired up when I read that. That is awesome.
That's really hard for me to believe that you would get fired up about something, Mary Kate. I just can't quite picture what that would look like.
If you want to read more from where that religious freedom notion comes from, read John Courtney Murray. He was the one that kind of pioneered a lot of that.
Okay, I'm adding it to my list.
Yeah, he was huge at Vatican II. So I know a lot of people say that you should read Dei Verbum first if you're going to read all the documents. I thought the most interesting read was Lumen Gentium. If you want to know what the church is and what the laity does, and it was really, really fascinating. It's the first document, and it wasn't the first one published, but I think it's the first one in a lot of like compilations. So read Lumen Gentium.
First one was Sacrosanctum Concilium.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Wait, what was the first one?
The first one actually approved was ironically, and I'll tell you why it's ironic, but Sacrosanctum Concilium. It's literally this sacred council.
Yeah.
And it's all about the liturgy, and it's the one that it's of all the ones that have gotten abused. It's the one that's I think would probably gotten the most abused, because if you read it and then you look at the changes that happen in the church and what people say, like the Vatican II church, you're like, well, the Vatican II doesn't say anything about any of this,
right?
So there was a lot of people who use Vatican II as the excuse to do a lot of things.
It's the phrase we've heard all of: the spirit of Vatican II.
The spirit of Vatican II.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So.
Right. I would agree with Dan that Lumen Gentium is probably the most important document to come out of Vatican II, because it was
the most interesting read.
Yeah, and the most interesting read. I think it really gives the I mean, it really, it's not necessarily, I mean, it doesn't really say anything necessarily new, but it does present it in a way that's, I think, very clear, and maybe in a way that, like, it's, you know, as most church councils do, it was, this is stuff we've always believed, but here it is put into words, you know. And so it really is really, it's not difficult to read. I think it's I don't know, I can't remember how long it is, but it wouldn't take you long to read. It's not a difficult read.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
What's your, I'm curious, each of you, maybe this is a horrible question. Maybe it's not, I don't know. What is your favorite church document / encyclical that you've ever read?
For me, probably Deus Caritas Est, by the first encyclical written by Pope Benedict.
I have to add these to my list.
I think the one that I just always.
Wait, Kev, what'd you say that one was? The first encyclical what?
Pope Benedict, Deus Caritas Est, God is love. And I mean, the one that I think is still the most, like, you know, that I read and it shakes me as to how prophetic it was. I mean, Humana Vitae is still, like, you read it.
I was gonna say that.
You read it. Maybe it's not necessarily my favorite to read, but you rarely read something and the Pope lays out consequences and all those things come true.
It was prophetic. It was prophetic.
Truly a prophetic in terms of being able to see into the future. That type of prophecy was truly prophetic by Pope Paul VI.
Amen.
Saint Pope Paul VI.
Yes.
But yeah,
Amen.
I would say Deus Caritas Est is probably.
So Humana Vitae, right? But
Humana
then
Vitae.
also, my joke answer is that I don't read any of them. I just try and find little pithy quotes that can support things I already believe.
There we go. You did it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Bishop, you could, Bishop Lefebvre would be very proud.
That's my favorite.
I would say either Fides et Ratio, Lumen Gentium, which is a council document.
Wait, Dan, say the first one again.
Fides et Ratio. It's an
Fides.
encyclical by John Paul II on faith and reason.
Okay.
Man, we've read snippets from there. How many times, Kevin? Golly.
Well, we're technically supposed to read the whole thing our PT 1 year. Now,
Yeah.
did either of us read the full thing? Of course we did, because we're responsible and good seminarians.
Exactly.
We're good seminarians.
The way you guys talk about seminary, it kind of
Tim
sounds
for
like
sure
high
read it all,
school.
Yeah, so Fides et Ratio, Lumen Gentium, and Redemptoris Mater, which is
I've read that.
John Paul II's on the Blessed Virgin Mary and the life of the Pilgrim Church.
Sick. Yep.
All right, Tim.
Tim, hit me.
Providentissimus Deus by Pope Leo XIII. It was kind of the precursor to De Verbum.
Classic.
Constitution.
Tim pulls out a Pope Leo one. Okay, wait, say it again. Say it again.
So much good Leo stuff.
Wait, Tim, say it again.
Providentissimus Deus.
You guys, I'm literally trying to spell Latin right now. You got to talk slow.
Latin.
Oh,
gosh.
Deus.
Nice.
I don't know. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, everyone.
And so it's about how the church treats sacred scripture and its relation to tradition. And it was heavily quoted in De Verbum from the Second Vatican Council.
Sick.
It's just a great thing because a lot of people just like they misuse Vatican II documents, they misuse scripture as well. And so it kind of addresses that back in the 1870s. Like, oh, come on. So,
Yeah. Sick.
David,
Nice.
David brings up an interesting question in the chat of, is the scripture technically a document of the church?
Yes, it is.
Yes. I don't
The
know.
answer has to be yes. If the answer is no, we're in the wrong church.
Well, I mean, it is a document of the church. I feel like I never really thought about it as that, but I mean, you can't
Compiled by the church.
compile by the church.
Every
entire
aspect is
deposit of-
written by members of the church,
The
right?
entire deposit of faith belongs to the church. So
Yeah. Hey, John. Here's John, a trivia question for John. No one else is allowed to answer because I think the seminarians would know this. No, Mary Kate is allowed to answer this as well. When was
I'm not a seminarian.
when was canon? When was canon?
I
When
don't
was
know if Father Ryan was watching us last week. I don't know if he's watching now, but I made a joke to him about being a seminarian. I don't think he thought it was fun. Did I say that last week? I think I did. Anyway, Kevin, sorry. Go ahead.
When was Scripture, the canon of Scripture, ratified by the church or confirmed by the church?
534.
No way. Is that right?
Nope.
I'm not even gonna try to guess.
Well, it has to be something close to that because you saw
It's
this.
not actually.
Oh,
No.
damn it. Okay. Am I just like dyslexic in my numbers?
No.
It's
No. It's
I'm very
actually,
confused by the reactions now.
it's actually the Council of Trent.
Is
As
that
far as it actually being officially approved, the canon dogmatically by the church.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Officially.
when was the
officially,
when was the Council of Trent? I think I know, but I'm not gonna say it.
15,
Oh.
15, I mean, right
I was
around
close.
it was right after the Reformation. 15,
I was gonna say 13.
70, I
but
think is
okay.
when it finished.
I was gonna say like 1 year off. I was
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, yeah, all right. We're getting into nerdy trivia, but David
Okay, I
Allen,
don't mind.
Well-
David got it. Nice job, David.
In John's
David-
defense,
someone come to my defense. What?
What?
in John's defense, though, so the church has always held like tradition, carrying on like big T tradition, and so it makes you wonder, what was the reason for them talking about it in Trent? Because it was a response to the Protestants who were saying like, no, this has always been our tradition, but I think maybe because it wasn't like put directly into words, that was like why it needed to come about in Trent. So yeah, technically Trent is where that is, but the real answer is tradition. Come on. So,
Tradition.
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 Look at
Okay,
that
I'm gonna ask
tattoo.
another question. I'm gonna ask another question because it's come up a couple times recently in Slack, and it's 10:07. But I don't know. I guess we can stop whenever you guys need to go to bed. Okay, I want to know the official relationship between tradition and like what's the dogmatic authority there? Does that make sense what I'm asking? Like, to what extent can tradition become enough reason for something to become a dogma of the church?
I don't. This is a long question. I'm not personally comfortable answering it because I don't know in and out of it. There's a whole. As far as like how doctrine develops and all this stuff of, Scripture itself was like, how did it get chosen? Well, it was what people were using. Like what was the church using at early liturgies? Well, it was these four gospels, and then this Acts of the Apostles, and then these certain letters from Paul and a few others, and that was what was being used. Now, were a few churches using these quote unquote Gnostic gospels and stuff like that? Yeah, they could have been using certain stuff, but what developed over time is this, it emerges. So it wasn't like the Pope said, okay, you're gonna use this and this and this, but they looked back and said, well, here's what's gonna be. And it like lists formed, and it developed over time, and you see it emerging now. You're asking a question that I struggle with all the time of like, when can you, I think the question you're asking is, when can you just say like, we've been doing this for a really long time, and therefore it is doctrine. I don't know if you can ever say. I don't know if you can ever.
Like something. Okay, like Marian doctrine.
Yes. Okay, that's what I was gonna talk about.
I know.
Yeah, well, there's a you can point back. You can point to like, this has always been a part of the church, but I think there's theology that comes with it. There is scriptural basis that comes with it. There's a lot of things that go along with it. So can you ever say, we've believed this for a really long time, and so we're going to define in 1850 the Immaculate Conception?
Yeah, my understanding is that's how that happened, basically. Is that not how that happened?
Dan.
I just totally spaced. What did you say?
You're talking about your point about
making
marrying. Talk about your
You
point
were making a meme?
I'm not ashamed, trust me, but what was the
You were
question?
making a meme and you
He's our
missed my
Guatemalan
question.
meme farmer.
Meme farmer. That is the best. Okay, no. The question was, what was the question?
Yes.
The question, no. So Kevin said something about 1850 Immaculate Conception is now church dogma. And I said, okay, but my understanding is that literally happened based on 1,850 years of tradition or whatever.
Yeah. So, if you read books on like Marian dogmas, like Mary as Mother of God is the basis for everything else we can say about Mary. And so the Immaculate Conception, I mean, you can read so much of the early church fathers, including people like Origen, who's like a heretic, and technically, and you can just see like this stuff has been in the works for so long, and it's inspired people for so long, and it's inspired our theology for a while. So like one of the ways that it gains authority is through what's called the sensus fideum. So it's kind of like it's basically like the sense of the people. And so what happens is that over time, theology is informed by oftentimes like popular practice or popular devotion. And so Marian dogma and doctrine and devotion is possibly the best example in the entire church of like what that looks like, because so much Marian devotion came about before there was actually any official dogma put out by the church. So how much authority does tradition have? It just depends on the time. So, in the early church, there was a lot of debate and discussion about Mary. And so could you say like, well, Mary's Immaculate Conception is, this is authoritative tradition at the time? I don't think so, just because there was so much question about it at the time. But like now we can say with certainty. So it develops over time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Well, I think David in the comments brings up an interesting point regarding
David, we need to just go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Just that you can have the tradition forever, and then when it gets challenged, that's when it then can become defined or not defined. And I don't know if that's true historically, but logically it makes sense.
Maybe in theory, but also like obviously Protestants pretty much across the board do not acknowledge Mary to the extent that Catholics do. So there has to be some level of like, I'm sure some people did challenge it, which also on the other hand, a lot of the reasons oftentimes that these things become formalized is that someone came along and challenged it, and then they had to say like, okay, actually, now that there's been a debate about it,
Right.
Here's like the formal definitive, this is what this actually is.
Yeah. Like
I mean, that's kind of the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I don't know what it was for Mary. I'm just asking.
Yeah. Like Martin Luther was convinced of Mary as Mother of God, which nowadays like Protestants, most Protestants vehemently deny. But Luther only had a problem with the Immaculate Conception because it was going against his new theology of justification, and how all have sinned or deprived of the glory of God. And it's like, well, that has to include Mary too.
That's inconvenient.
And so it was kind of
An inconvenient truth, one might say.
Yeah. Hey.
What'd you say, John? What'd you say?
I said you might say it's an inconvenient truth.
Wait, no, you guys just froze.
You froze on our screen.
Yeah, you're the frozen one.
Yeah. So like,
Touche.
Mary Kate, like,
Dang it.
there's like capital T tradition and there's lower T tradition. That's not an official thing in the church.
Right.
But, like capital T tradition is what we would say.
That's not an official thing?
I don't.
You're telling me that my Catholic parochial school taught me something that was not an official thing of the Catholic Church.
And then like lower T tradition would be like, all of us celebrating Mardi Gras and indulging in food before.
Which we know, Mary Kate and Dan.
Wow, here we go.
Hot take number 10.
No.
That's lower T tradition right there, folks.
You're getting a real taste of this is what Slack is. Now, if you guys want to get a taste of what Slack is actually like, this is it. It just
Oh man.
You guys, we're getting on like a real roll now, though. I like it. It's good.
yeah.
This is great.
You just got to
Have
stick with us through the first 2 hours, and we'll start to build steam as we go.
Yeah, the after 10 is like the after hours
Yeah.
that we just, we really lay it out.
After the party is the after. After the party,
we basically we
hotel
get through
lobby.
the agenda. and
After
then
the party, is the after
Hotel
party.
lobby.
that Fat Tuesday conversation.
Is that what you were
crazy,
saying? I thought that's what Kevin was saying.
It's a remix edition. You know that one. Anyway, I'm derailed it. I don't know. To go back to the actual question of the weight of tradition and like you do it for a long time. I don't know. It's something that I hope to. We take ecclesiology in our third year, which is the study of the church and kind of how the church works, and with the hierarchy for the people, scripture and tradition. Like, how do we get some of these things? That's a question that I really hope to get answered in that class, because I think that there's folks on Slack who poke a lot of holes in what I think. Are they right? Am I right? I don't know. I want to get more definitive answer. But I mean, you could, like, I think David said it in the chat. David's really putting up he's putting on a show to, like, he's beyond the actual chat, because we get a ground report from New York City, honestly. But it's a huge question. Like, where does the weight of tradition? Can we just point to that? Say, like, we've been doing this this is the way it has developed, and this is what it's been. We've been doing this for all these years. I mean, clerical celibacy kind of grew into that. There was never really like a thou shalt do it, and by the time you get to, like, the 1200, just like it's the norm, and then it's talked about in some of the church documents, and it's there, and it's like, well, we're not really defining anything new. We're just like saying, like, this is the way we've done it for a long time. We're just gonna say it here. And I don't know. It's a fascinating question, because I get myself in a pickle, because one of my least favorite sayings is this is the way we've always done it, and so this is why we do it.
This is why we do it.
Well, yeah. So you can never, like, solely appeal to tradition, right? Like, appeals to tradition for their own sake,
right?
But if that's, like, the only evidence that you have, like, then you would need a good reason. In my mind, in my very uneducated mind, like, if all the evidence is just saying we've always done it this way, and then you bring up a point that says, well, here's why we shouldn't be doing it this way, then yeah, I'll listen. But if you can't find a way to get me to say tradition is bad.
I guess for me, though, like, that's one of my favorite things about the church that I think is most beautiful, is that when we have questions about something, like, I remember, so I grew up in Reagan Christie, and I remember being in, like, 7th grade and having this experience of, like, starting to ask questions for the first time. Like, I remember hearing a lesson during a Reagan Christie thing about JP2 and having this question in my mind that I was basically like, this whole Pope thing, is this even real? You know what I mean? Something like that. And the thing that for me is beautiful about the Catholic faith is we can go back so far and see in writings and accounts and traditions and all these other things, not just the, like, formalized decisions that the church has made, but all of the years and years and years and numerous people who have contributed to those ideas over time, who have, like, actually thought through these things. And that's one of the things that frustrates me with people, I think some of whom are in our friend circle, who think they present ideas as though they know better than the 2,000 years of church history that have been accumulated over time. And my response to that is not the church knows better than you. My response to that is, this has been such an accumulation of knowledge and prayer and practice and conversation that goes so far beyond anything each of us as individuals can read on the internet Granted, we can read a lot of this on the internet. I don't know. So I just think like there's, for me, and maybe it's because like I've bought into that, or like because I've been like convinced by it, that like I trust that aspect of the church. And again, not to say we shouldn't ask questions, but I trust that aspect of the church, because the church, there's so much more than just we've formalized these ideas that we just like sat down at a table and decided this was how it was going to be.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Mary Kate, as Kevin was saying earlier, like so much of this is developed because people have disagreed with it, and we've developed it because of the conversation. So, you know, when you get someone who may strongly disagree with it, it's like it's worth at least entertaining it and going through it, and not being like, well, tradition says no. Like the only reason tradition's developed is because we've continued to talk about it, right? So it's important to have a conversation.
You guys can't send stuff in the group and say it's for the men here. It's just exclusively. That's not fair.
Now all the people at home know that we have a side chat with. It's like a, you know, we're peeling back the curtain, and I don't know if we want to do that.
We're peeling back the curtain.
Yeah.
The seventh wall has been broken.
Nice.
Sam Gans, Dan, how can you choose to be celibate with these great dad jokes?
Well, he's going to be a spiritual
That's
father,
awesome.
of course.
What?
Like a spiritual grandpa.
That's awesome.
Okay, so I missed the past couple of minutes. Dan, why did you send that? Like, why is that pertinent?
Wait,
what?
what did Dan send?
I'm sorry, that was Kevin. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't want to explain it to the people out who are watching.
All right, never mind. Forget it.
Wait, I haven't actually looked at it.
Don't
Should
look
I
at it.
Oh, now everyone's confused. So.
Which is fine. They've been confused for the last 2 hours.
Oh my gosh.
I'll do a share screen and show everybody.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, it's
Break the wall.
Share screen is so dangerous. So dangerous. Yikes.
Oh, man.
So comment of the night, my vote would be Jacques saying Mary, now we are getting to the good stuff, because Mary is the good stuff. Or it's Mary.
No, I think Jack said that.
Mary Kate quoting R. Kelly and saying, running my head to my bro.
Mary Kate cannot win.
44,
Comment of the night. We've already.
I'm not allowed. Apparently, I'm not allowed to win.
Not allowed.
Oh yeah.
I'm not allowed to win best comment.
So, unfortunately, I have to go way back, and it's simple. It's to the point. It's poignant. Unfortunately, it would be 2 weeks in a row. Kevin O'Malley, #SaveSaintHouse.
I mean, yeah.
It's a great comment. It's a great comment.
Yeah, truly.
Kevin O'Malley.
And he only it was only Kevin O'Malley's only one. Like
It's a 1-for-1. You know, David Ellett said he was going quantity over quality, and I will make no statements to the quality of his comments, but there was certainly a lot of them. However, Kevin O'Malley with one comment, it's been in my head the entire evening. It's a good one.
Have also had the great comment last week about Kevin having more auto-tune than T-Pain. That was last week.
There is a reason we named this award the Kevin O'Malley Comments of the Week.
Oh, I forgot that we did.
Sam is not happy.
Wow, you guys.
I love
This
this
is too fun
engagement
for us
we're
to
getting.
stop
I know.
doing this. We're gonna have to do this forever now.
Yeah, I'm going to say it again. David Ellett has earned, I think, consideration for a place on a future panel because.
I
Be a good
agree.
speaker.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, cool.
What do you guys
David
feel
Ellett,
about
if you're out there still.
trying to recruit? What do you guys feel about us trying to recruit some women for this panel?
Yeah, probably a good
us?
idea.
Yeah.
Probably a very good idea.
I don't think we were ever
That's
against that,
encouraging.
Mary Kate.
Yeah.
I'm just checking. No, Dan, we didn't, and I
Did you
thought
not
of it
notice how
halfway through.
I took my hand
know,
off
we
at the
messed
start of
up.
the.
Nice job, Dan. You're the seminary. You're supposed to remember these things.
I know. I'm
Yeah,
here.
you're
All your
supposed to
fault.
remember these things. So we should
It seemed
end
like
with
we were about
prayer.
to
We should end with-
start, but then
That's-
with the
My
live
hat
stream
was
thing
off. I was ready to pray. We didn't pray.
Yeah, well.
came. I remember that.
Would do.
I am the media, David. Quoting John Trainer. Did you
It's not a direct quote. but
actually
it's pretty
say that,
close.
or is you just?
No, that was when I mentioned that comment came when I mentioned that if you're looking for specific Catholic media to follow, it's this
Us.
live stream right here.
Yep.
This is the one. This is the one. You'll get
Yeah, well,
up to date, uneducated, off the top of our head content you can find anywhere.
You can find anywhere.
John will warn you though if he doesn't actually know. You're pretty, John. I think you've warned us a couple times. I don't actually know, but this is my opinion.
Yeah. Which is
That's
what I
good.
fire off on Slack all the time, and that's what I was told I was supposed to bring to these live chats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I would prefer that no one do any research. This is all hot takes. We are purely hot takes here.
Make a list.
Give the people what they really want. No one wants research.
No, that's true.
Everyone just wants drama.
Yeah, yeah.
We need like a theology hype man, though. Somebody just like,
Yes.
yeah,
Tim, are you volunteering?
sure.
Yeah, Tim, you should be our theology hype man. Nice. Someone in the group has to make sure we don't spew heresy
Of
at any
course.
point.
Well, I
So
think
who's
I've
going
always
to take
been
that
Tim's job.
responsibility?
That has been Tim's job from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Oh, so back
Speaking
to
of
your
heresy,
question.
Speaking of yeah,
Speaking of
Speaking of heresy, I'm out of
No,
here.
Mary Kate's question 2 hours ago. Illinois is larger than Honduras.
Ah,
So we also need Tony Reale to come in here with the fact checks at the end of the.
oh
Yeah.
yes, that boy,
with the
Good
fact-
Catholic. good Catholic boy, Tony.
Good
Reale.
Catholic boy, Tony Reale. That's right. That's right.
So Tony,
Rigged.
I know we know you're listening right now.
Right.
You're welcome. You're welcome at any time.
All right, you guys.
But by the way, Tim, you had your sponsor, the whatever you're using, whatever camera software you're using, it had the promo up on your thing the whole time. I was gonna say at the end, you know, the Chicago Inquisition brought to you by Spotto.
Arco Cam or whatever.
I mean,
Spotto.
I think we all know the actual sponsor
Yeah.
of the Chicago Inquisition.
Miller Lite.
Miller
Wow.
Now
beer.
we just got censored.
Miller beer. You got
Get
the
out there.
time. We got the beer. Miller beer.
I do not. That will not happen. on my
John Trainer
watch.
endorses. David Ellett, is Chicago itself bigger than Honduras? It might have more people than Honduras, but I don't
Honduras
think it's
has
bigger than
Honduras has 9 point something billion.
9.9.
There you go.
Million?
Yeah.
How many does
So-
Chicago have? Should I know that?
12 point. Oh, Chicago. I don't know. All of Illinois was 12.2 million.
Chicago. Chicago only has what, like 3 million or?
Depends if you
Chicago
count
land is
metropolitan
like
area.
We're doing like the
Yeah.
metro.
Yeah.
This is high quality content
This is the
2.7
research that people
million.
wanted.
Right.
in the actual.
Be
city.
googling.
That's right. You watch us Google your
Google
questions.
and you can watch us try to determine.
Put your questions in the chat. We will Google them.
Share your screen. We'll see Tim Googling stuff for us.
Chicago metro population is 9,533,040.
All right.
Wow.
So
It was
Yes.
larger
So
than
what-
Honduras.
So what
Or
I'm hearing
just-
is we can take over Honduras.
Yeah.
We
Wow.
can take them.
Okay, so now what is the breakdown of able-bodied men between the two?
Mm.
You all right over there, Mary Kate?
Dan can
Women
speak
and
Spanish.
children in Honduras or in Chicago. Is that essentially what you're asking right now?
I'm asking about our
How many
fighting.
has weak people? Or what was that question? Which one has more weak people? What's happening?
Alrighty.
Hola, estamos
I
aquí
think we're-
para
we're
tomar
done.
tu tierra.
Lamote llamas. How are your llamas?
Oh shoot.
Shall we?
I-
Our real
Wait, I have
sponsor
to
is
tell
right
one
here.
quick story. No, I have to tell one quick story. I
All
was a missionary in Mexico a summer in high school, and we used to talk all the time about how chickens in Spanish don't say bok bok. They say pio pio. Did you know that?
What?
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
John, say
You know, in
PO.
English we say like, what does a chicken say? What? We say
We
like, what does a chicken say? A chicken says like bok. No, no one thinks chickens.
All right, someone out there has to know Arrested Development. You got my reference.
I
Thank
got
you.
you. I got
Oh,
you.
I don't watch Arrested Development. Chicken and Dan.
End it.
I will never forget that for the rest of my life. Okay, yeah, we shouldn't be done though.
Oh, this has been so great.
All right. Who's gonna lead us in prayer? Wow.
All right.
You're guys gonna make me the only. You're gonna
All
make
right,
one of the
here we
lay people lead us in prayer.
Here
We're
we
all
go.
lay
You guys
people.
ready?
I know. I'm just teasing.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord Jesus Christ, we ask you to send the graces of your resurrection into our hearts and our souls. We ask you to set our souls on fire for the sake of your gospel. And we pray that during this time of quarantine that we may ever grow closer to you. That we may love you all the more deeply, and we may share your love with all your people, no matter where they are. We ask you for healing of all those who have quarantine, all those who have coronavirus, and for all those who are suffering in ways that are known only to you. And we ask for the intercession of our Blessed Mother Mary as we pray together. Hail Mary, full of grace.
Full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the
blessed
fruit
is
of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Always.
Saint Alphonsus,
Pray for us.
For us.
Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen.
Our Lady Endure of Knots.
Pray for us.
For us.
Such a good
right.
one.
Same time next week, gang.
Yeah.
Join us.
More hot takes.
Hot takes, and we're gonna Google stuff.
Yeah. Although Googling stuff, I think we should just spout out, in terms of non-ML research. I mean, we shouldn't look up things on Google. We should just spout them out. We're more reputable than Google. We just say things, and it's gospel truth.
That's what Father Carty tells us. He's like, even if you're wrong, say it with confidence. Like,
Boom.
okay.
Is that an answer? Is that a question or an answer?
Yeah.
Eric Nyberg just commented. Hello, Eric.
Oh,
Eric Nyberg.
Eric, you're late. I was here for the Arrested Development chicken. Well done.
More Arrested Development.
the
content next
height
week.
of the episode. Don't worry, Eric.
Eric, you're too late.
Yeah. What time does he think we started it?
Eric, we talked about your family.
That's true.
It is true.
That's not weird.
The Nybergs are a Chicago Catholic establishment, though.
That is
Say it
100% true.
100%. That's a fact. That's a fact.
Go across the street from St. Ed's. They will welcome you with open arms.
Contain one of my 3 favorite seminarians.
Whoa.
Yeah.
no.
Look at
Ouch.
hot
Do the
takes
math.
coming.
Do the math. Yeah.
Hot take. What number are we on, Dan?
I don't know. It's somewhere in double digits.
At least from John. John's had a lot of hot takes tonight.
I don't remember any of them. So
Miller Lite is our new sponsor. That's a pretty hot take.
I don't think that's a hot take at all. I'm pretty sure we were trying to get men's
Cold
groups.
hard
That's
fact.
that's ice cold, isn't it?
It's ice.
I'm sorry. I hate making stupid puns like that, and I
So
did it.
good though. So good.
Oh,
Wow, Kevin, what was that?
I don't know.
We should go.
Our number of viewers is slowly
Hey
trickling
guys,
down.
all right, next week.
Next week.
Alrighty.
People are like, now they're just losing it. All right, bye guys.
Later.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Should you just leave us on YouTube?
I don't know. Hey, we're still on YouTube. Hey, John, how's it going? Okay, now you're here for the real content.
All right. So we got rid of those jokers.
Yeah. Okay.
So Kevin, a little
Yeah.
bit of post-game thoughts on what that conversation was for you. How did you feel you were portrayed?
Oh, I'm always portrayed in a higher light than I ever deserve. And you know, they had us in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. But you know, I thought we really came back and had a strong finish. And
It did seem like at the beginning of the show there, we had a little bit of a trouble getting started. Now, could we jot that down to a little bit of second week nerves, or is this something that we can come to expect week in, week out?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we're finding the groove earlier and earlier, and I think it's going to really wrap up well. And I'm really glad I never have to give any post-game interviews, because this sucks. Because I have no idea what to say. This is a terrible.
The good news is on my end, it's just the old cliche questions that everyone asks every single week. So.
Well, and those are the questions. Those are the ones that people really care about. So
yeah. Well, I gotta say, you were a real team player out there.
Thank you.
You definitely carried your weight, and I look forward to hearing from you again next week.
All right, thank you. And Mary Kate, if you're still watching, maybe I don't know if I think you need to control the YouTube, because otherwise it's gonna be a black screen, which is actually potentially better content than anything I've delivered at any point tonight.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I wonder if I can drop down arrow here. Nope.
Yeah, we can view it on stream. Let's see. I mean, we still got folks watching us, so I mean, I think we can just keep going until.
How can you tell if it's cold if the mountains aren't blue, David? Oh, that's a really good question. So our good Lord gave us these two hands here. What I advise you to do: you grab the Miller Lite out of the fridge, put your hand around it. If you feel that cold sensation, that is what a cold Miller Lite.
Now, what if it's too cold and you've got a Christmas Story tongue on the flagpole situation?
So yeah, well, I'm not advising you to lick the can, Kevin. However,
I mean, isn't Miller Lite that delicious where I just want to lick the can? Just like, oh man, the can is just.
I do advise you to not do that.
Okay. Well,
next question.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to stick to my, I'm going to stick to my Jameson Ginger. I did finish it a long time ago.
Now, what is it strictly Jameson that you're going with there?
It is strictly Jameson, and it is strictly ginger ale. It is the two together with some ice.
Now, do you have a preferred ginger ale brand?
I do not. This one is Canada Dry, because it was on sale at the Jewels.
The Jewels, thank you. I appreciate that correction, so that our Chicago area viewers do not get upset with us. Canada Dry, it is the first name I think of when I think of ginger ale. So solid.
Ginger ale is one of those things that really I didn't appreciate at all growing up. I don't really drink it, and it's something that's I've kind of developed a taste for it. Ginger ale, ginger beer, I'm a sucker for a good Moscow Mule.
Now, are you a fan of the ginger that comes with the sushi? Does your ginger love extend?
I like ginger that comes with sushi, but I don't eat it. For me, I use it as a little cleanser in between my sushi. I don't put it on the sushi. I love my wasabi, and I put the wasabi directly on the sushi.
Yes.
Soy sauce, and then if I want to maybe I can get a little aggressive with the wasabi, and so that the ginger sometimes is a good cleanser to cool it down.
No, I mean, you're 100% correct there, and actually, you'll be interested to know that the ginger is not designed to go on the sushi. It is designed to be the palate cleanser, so you are using it correctly. Regarding your wasabi usage, you are also 100% correct. It's an important line to toe with your wasabi. You want to be right at that little bit that gets your sinuses going.
Yeah,
that's the appropriate amount of wasabi.
Yeah, and I frequently go over that edge on a frequent basis, but I'm comfortable with doing it. It's worth it. because I love wasabi.
Sam Gans disrespecting our Miller Lite sponsor in the comments. Sam, whoever you are, I'm coming for
Yeah. That's not a way to get on this panel.
you. Yeah, that's
Even
true.
though I have also just
not Kevin. Watch yourself.
I
Watch
know.
yourself.
I'm just
You're
gonna
on the
stop
air.
right there.
You're on the air
I
still.
am on the air. I am. All right. Yeah.
Okay, but I really would. Can we just end this? Does it stop?
The question is, if we end it, does it stop?
Does anyone know this out there?
If you're out there, we tried to reach out to Mary Kay, but she may have just gone literally straight to bed. And I mean, it's. I have no idea.
Dan, give us some topics to talk about. He says to keep going, but
Dan knows as well as I do that maybe he was a good boy and did his holy hour earlier today, but I have not. So I've got that.
Oh,
just sitting ahead of me. I went and visited my mis padres today. So
we are still live on YouTube apparently. So all right. Well, 7 people are still watching. I think one of them is me, probably.
One of them is me. Oh. Okay. All right. I think we just say end it. This is the highest quality content we've delivered all night, is trying to figure out how to end the call.
Okay. So I'm just gonna close out of Zoom.
I also am going to, and hopefully that ends it. So people out there, we'll see you next week.
All right.